Chapter 306. A long time ago, when Yolashanda was still a young parrot, he asked Ao Daisai with great interest, Ao Daisai, tell me the truth. What kind of living environment do you want to choose the most? He thought that Ao Daisai would definitely say that the vast grassland or the ocean must be full of freedom. But he did not expect that Ao Daisai would say without hesitation, the zoo. Yolashanda was surprised, but he immediately figured it out. This guy must have said that because he always wanted to go to the zoo. No, Ao Daisai really wanted to live in the zoo. Wasn't the zoo good? There was food and drink, and he did not need to earn money to spend. He could eat and sleep whenever he wanted. It was not as comfortable in the wild. Take parrots as an example. For some health supplements and delicious food, they would conquer the sea of stars until they retired in their 40s or 50s. Ao Daisai wanted to go to the zoo in his next life, so it was understandable. Was this a late realization? Yolashanda snickered. He had wanted to go to the zoo for a long time. Oh, finally. And Ao Daisai had the same idea. Okay, let's pray that it's the zoo. Yolashanda asked again. Then where do you want to go the least? Was there a need to ask? Ao Daisai glanced at little cutie. Where's the most dangerous? The African grassland. So what if he was a lion? Every day, he would either fight or be fought. He would never go to the African grassland. Yes, Yolashanda also felt that the African grassland was bad, and he would never go there. The couple, who had once led their brothers to shake the African prairie, criticized the African prairie to be worthless. Their brothers were loyal, but it was a pity that the African grassland was not worth it. At the time of this conversation, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai probably did not know what a toxic healer was, but they definitely knew what Murphy's Law was. After a long time, they naturally ended their lives as parrots and welcomed a new life. He opened his eyes and looked around. What he saw was an endless grassland. Antelopes could be seen under the grass as the wind blew. There were also strange-looking trees with crooked necks. They were so enchanting and strange, yet so familiar. Two dejected leopards that were about to reach adulthood stood up from the grass. Their expressions were that of an old man on the subway looking at his phone. In just a second, they were certain that they were in the African savannah. His defenses were broken. His defenses were broken. But this was real. They had reincarnated into the African savannah, where they could not relax for even a moment. Once again, Ao Daisai, how could this be? Yolashanda's confused voice rang out beside him. It was good to have new students, but the problem was that this place was too messy. He did not want to stay here. I don't want to be here either. Ao Daisai had no way to comfort her. She could only open her mouth and stick out her tongue to dissipate the heat. There was no doubt that it was the dry season, the season that the couple hated the most. Moreover, they were not in good condition at the moment, as if they had not eaten for several days. It took them a while to accept that the situation was real. Don't be sad. Let's go and drink some water. Ao Daisai licked Yolashanda's ear. As a leopard, Yolashanda was very thin and weak. His ribs were clearly visible. Leopards could live independently at the age of 2. They had always been known as lone killers. They were still carefree and unrestrained when they wandered under the eyes of lions, tigers, and other ferocious beasts. As long as they could get their hands on something, there was nothing that they did not dare to do. The two of them were probably not even 2 years old when they were in such a miserable state. I want to go to the zoo, Yolashanda said sincerely as they walked on the hot road. I wanted to. Not only did Ao Daisai wanna, he also had a plan. The next time we see a photographer, we will go and scam him. Good plan. Wasn't this easy? Weren't there photographers everywhere on the African savannah? Yolashanda was temporarily relieved. Now, they had to save their lives first. They walked to the river and drank enough water. Their bodies felt much better. This was the second time they walked on this land. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai clearly felt that the treatment was different. First of all, the surrounding animals did not run away in panic when they saw the two of them. Secondly, when they drank water, a hippopotamus came over and squeezed them away. The other party came over aggressively. It was written all over its body, "Go, go, go, you don't deserve to drink water here." Preposterous. A little hippopotamus dared to be impudent. Yolashanda had not changed his habit yet. He was actually bullied by a hippopotamus. He immediately wanted to stick out his neck and shout back. Fortunately, Ao Daisai stopped him in time. Be good, let's drink upstream. Don't lower yourself to his level. As the king of this land, Ao Daisai had a temper. He had a big temper, but he could not lose his temper now. They were no longer lions. Even if they fought, no one would come. Yolashanda calmed down angrily. He knew what the situation was now, but he still said, if you didn't stop me just now, I definitely would not have let him off. Ao Daisai, yes, calm down. We won't lower ourselves to his level. The two big leopards slowly walked upstream to drink water. Although they felt the difference in their status, the two of them were not particularly angry. Being looked down on was only temporary. A strong adult leopard was definitely a legendary figure in the grassland. It was strong, evil, and unique. One leopard could rob houses, fly in the sky, and burrow into the ground, let alone two. Wait, flying underground was easy to understand. It was digging holes. This was Yolashanda's strength. But the leopard's specialty was flying. That was a little difficult for him. In Yolashanda's impression, the leopard was an expert in climbing trees. It jumped from one tree to another and chased monkeys until they chirped. Monkey, the tree is my home ground. You're making me lose face. Actually, not only did they have to avoid hippos, they also had to avoid other carnivores, including their own kind. Fortunately, the sun was about to set. The last bit of sunlight shone on the gorgeous fur of the two slightly depressed leopards until they disappeared into the depths of the grass. Like all cats, leopards would hunt at night. They often used the trick of crawling forward and waiting for an opportunity to come to the side of their prey. The experienced old foxes Yolashanda and Ao Daisai did not have to worry about their survival. Having the ability to survive and wanting to fight were two different things. The couple's survival skills were still very strong. When the night turned dark, Ao Daisai lay in the grass and Yolashanda went to chase their prey. At night, the antelopes gathered together. The sound of wild beasts would scare them and make them panic. Ao Daisai saw an antelope running past him and jumped out from the side, aiming his fangs at the antelope's neck. But if he was alone, it would not be enough. He was too light and would be taken away by the antelope. For example, now, the antelope struggled to stand up. Ao Daisai, who was hanging on the antelope, had lost the initiative. He had to wait for Yolashanda's help to win. Leopards are the only feline that knew how to attack with gravity. Of course, Yolashanda was born to understand the importance of a run-up. He flew over from afar like a small cannon and knocked the antelope over again. The two leopards bit the antelope tightly. As the wound became bigger and more blood flowed, the antelope under them finally had no strength to struggle. There were hyenas everywhere. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai immediately worked together to carry their prey up the tree. At this time, a group of howling hyenas surrounded them, drooling over their food. Looking at the black hyena heads, Yolashanda's hair stood on end. This was the characteristic of the African grassland. Even if they had the ability to hunt, they might not be able to eat it. The two of them were so hungry that their eyes were green. At this time, they could not care less and buried their heads in the food. The hyenas' movements quickly attracted a few uninvited guests. There were a few young lions who were traveling together. They were so hungry that their eyes were green. After chasing away the hyenas, they all tried to snatch the leopard's prey. Lions also knew how to climb trees. One of them climbed up. Ao Daisai looked at the other calmly. He could not help but be glad that the tree he chose was very tall and could still climb up. Yolashanda was depressed. He had to climb up again after eating a few mouthfuls of meat. As an alien who did not know how to go down, his legs were a little weak. The lion's climbing skills could only be said to be okay. The one at the front looked like it wanted to create a miracle, but it was not strong enough. It climbed to the place where the two big tree branches twisted and got stuck. The two leopards, who had resolved the danger, did not gloat. They were all broken-winged angels who lived in the African grassland. No one was more relaxed than the other. If they were picky cheetahs, they would throw the remaining prey down for the lion to eat after eating their fill. Unfortunately, they were not picky. This antelope could still be eaten for the next meal. Their bodies were already weak to begin with, and they were even more sleepy after eating their fill. Hence, they tilted their heads and fell asleep on the remaining meat. It was normal for leopards to sleep on the tree with meat on their heads. The photographers who had tracked the lions here could not help but click their tongues in wonder when they saw two such thin and weak leopards sitting on an antelope. Leopards were really powerful. They fell asleep on the tree just like that. Their hind legs and tails hung down naturally, as if they were very relaxed and at ease with their surroundings. The lions under the tree were helpless. They wandered for a while before finally leaving. After Yelishanda and Ao Daisai woke up, they finished off the remaining half of the prey. After 2 sumptuous meals and sufficient sleep, they felt full of energy after 24 hours. After Ao Daisai's patient guidance and the advantages of leopards, Yelishanda finally knew how to get down from the tree. Standing on the ground, he sighed from the bottom of his heart. I really want to go to the zoo. The 2 leopards, who were determined to return to the zoo, ate 2 meals a day from the day they woke up. Sometimes they even ate 3 meals a day. This way, they could fatten themselves up as soon as possible. During this period, they had been paying attention to the photographer's tracks, but they did not encounter him. It seemed that the journey back to the zoo was not smooth. While the 2 leopards were eating, the cheetahs living in this area carefully came out to hunt. They were clearly a little afraid of the leopards, because they were also their prey. It can only be said that they did not have to think too much. At least, the 2 cheetahs living here would not attack them or snatch their prey. Yelishanda and Ao Daisai were outstanding. If they could catch antelopes and zebras, they did not need to spend much effort chasing after cheetahs. They were full and lay on the ground, their stomachs tickling. The cheetahs, who had a relaxed and safe environment, happily dragged their prey away. The cheetahs did not know that the 2 leopards lying on their stomachs near them were not interested in conquering the grassland. They only wanted to return to the animal park and grow fat. They were only 1 photographer away from this small goal. The author had something to say. The years we pretended to be sick and were 5 guarantees. National Zoo. Can't survive on the grassland? Couple. Oh, difficult. National Zoo. Strong and strong, with shiny fur. Who are you lying to? Chapter 307. It was not a wise choice to lie on the ground and linger. There were too many wild dogs and hyenas around. They were like bullshit ointment, always sticking to leopards and cheetahs. Relatively speaking, lions' food was not easy to covet because of the large number of lions. Most of the hyenas could only clamber nearby. Cheetahs also lived in groups. As they were not strong, the hyenas and wild dogs would still attack them. It was the same for lone leopards. However, these 2 leopards living together were not easy to deal with. In the past half a month, no wild dogs or hyenas had successfully stolen their food. Lions could not either, unless they were willing. The antelope was not too fat, but it only had a few horns left. When a skinny hyena appeared, Alexander and Otis looked at each other. They were not even interested in scaring the hyena. Lone hyenas were either injured, abandoned, or ostracized by the group. They rushed up the tree one after another and lay on the tree as they watched the thin hyena crawl forward. It carefully rubbed against the wreckage and tilted its head to lick the leftovers. The hyena was ugly to begin with. After a period of hunger, it was even skinnier and darker. Yelishanda and Ao Daisai did not want to chase it away. They watched as the hyena dragged the wreckage away with its tail between its legs. This hyena had indeed not eaten for a long time. He risked his life to wolf down the food under the eyes of the leopards, but he was still very afraid. The slightest movement around him would make him tremble in fear. Why is he alone? When Yelishanda was a lion, he did not have a good impression of hyenas, and he had never seen a hyena alone. Of course, a hyena alone would not dare to appear in front of a lion. A hot-tempered lion would immediately bite him in half. Ao Daisai observed that the hyena was exceptionally cautious and humble. He guessed. Maybe he was born weak and was bullied by his own kind. The hyena pack, which was divided into different levels, would not treat every hyena equally. The weakest hyena would not be given any food. Their fate was to starve to death. The hyena might have felt that the two leopards were not strong. After all, they had only been raised for half a month. The two of them had only gained a little weight, so he dared to approach them. To be honest, if not for Yolashanda and Ao Daisai's sympathy, even a thin and weak leopard could kill this dying hyena. After starving for days, the arrival of a full meal was like timely rain over a fire. After eating, Hyena did not leave for some reason. He carefully curled himself up and nestled near the two leopards to sleep. At first, he pricked up his ears and looked in the direction of the leopard from time to time. Later, he couldn't help but feel sleepy. He put his paws on his nose and started snoring. Why wasn't he leaving? Yolashanda looked around in confusion and scratched the tree trunk in confusion. This time, the hyena brought information about a group of wildebeests. They picked a medium-sized wildebeest, and the two of them were working together to deal with it. Halfway through, they heard the hyena follower cry out in panic. They judged that the lion had appeared. The two leopards did not want to work for the lion. They estimated that it would take some time to deal with the wildebeest, so they decisively gave up. A few female lions rushed over. The injured wildebeest had already run far away. They were not in the mood to find trouble with the leopards. They were just in a daze for a moment before chasing after the wildebeest. The hyena, who had been chased by the lion for a while, carefully poked his head out of the grass. When he found that the lion was gone, he trotted over to join them. He wagged his tail as if to say, "Fortunately, we are all fine." Yolashanda and Ao Daisai felt a little sorry for him. They had not found any information twice. The other party was probably hungry. They no longer expected the hyena to find prey alone. Instead, they took the initiative to search for prey in the distance. The hyena followed behind them from afar. He seemed to understand that he only needed to help next. This interesting scene was seen by the photographer, who was searching everywhere with binoculars. He felt that it was very nice. The two leopards were actually in a team and seemed to have a good relationship. There was a hyena behind them. Looking at the hyena's performance, it was clearly in the same team as the leopards. However, they were clearly enemies. In order to understand what was going on, the photographer moved closer and focused on observing this team. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai were very sensitive to the presence of humans. It must be the photographer they had been waiting for a long time. That was great. However, it was hunting time now. They could not communicate with the photographer immediately. Forget it, the hyena brothers are still waiting for dinner. Let's hunt first. Yolashanda was excited for a moment before he restrained himself. Yes, Ao Daisai said. This time, they had their eyes on a group of zebras. Even if the leopards were not as strong as the lions and did not have the teamwork of the lionesses, they could still take down the zebras alone. It was such a magical existence. Seeing that the leopards were preparing to hunt, the hyena no longer approached. He was in charge of guarding the surroundings to avoid the tragedy of being targeted by the lions. He was very professional and was very nervous. He would walk here to listen and then stand guard. Because it was dark, danger lurked everywhere in the grassland. At the same time, he was hungry. After running around all day, he had consumed a lot of energy. Not long after, the hyena heard good news from the leopards. He was very happy that the prey had been obtained, but he did not immediately run over to share it. His reflective eyes were still staring into the distance in case of danger. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai were also used to the hyena brothers' cautiousness. They ate in big mouthfuls and were almost full when the hyena finally returned. The other party's cheerful footsteps were a little probing. Only when he was sure that the two leopards would not do anything to him did he dare to taste the zebra meat. The photographer could not believe this scene. Two leopards and a hyena were eating together. God, they were so harmonious. Suddenly, there were wild dogs barking in the distance. From the sound of it, there were quite a few of them. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai were full, but the hyena brothers were not. The two of them discussed for a while and quickly dragged the zebra to the tree, while the hyena jumped into the night to hide and observe. Not long after, a group of hungry wild dogs surrounded the tree and barked at them. They even jumped up to try to reach the zebra's leg. Otis quickly picked up the leg as well, not giving the wild dogs a chance to escape. Yolashanda, who was looking down, thought, "Sorry, this is the hyena brothers' food. No one can eat it." They were stuck in the tree like this until the pack of wild dogs was so hungry that they could not wait any longer and left. Peace returned to the surroundings. The hyena hiding nearby quietly came out. When Ao Daisai saw him, he pushed the zebra down. After being disturbed by the pack of wild dogs, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai forgot about the photographer. They thought that there was nothing to do and fell asleep. When they woke up the next day, they both thought about the opportunity they missed yesterday and felt a little embarrassed. They quickly searched nearby. Was the photographer still there? Obviously, the photographer was no longer there. He still had to stay in the grassland to make a living today. Boo-hoo. The hyena brothers, who had been very happy recently, did not understand why the two leopard brothers had suddenly died. Weren't they living a good life? Anyway, he liked his current life very much. He could eat his fill every day and would not be bullied. It was simply too good. Yolashanda realized that the hyena was not so thin and small anymore. His black fur was gradually showing its original color. He thought from a different perspective. It was good that they missed the photographer today. If they returned to the zoo, the hyena that followed them would be helpless again. The grassland was still very hot during the day. Before noon arrived, the two leopards walked to the only river nearby to replenish their water. At this time, there were also many antelopes drinking water by the shore. When the hyena brothers saw their prey, their eyes lit up. They did not care about drinking water and only chased after their prey. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai were speechless. Weren't the hyena brothers too active? They had just eaten a full meal 5 hours ago, and the large piece of meat in their stomachs had not been completely digested. The two leopards ignored the active hyena and focused on drinking water. The hyena, who had woken up early and worked late for this family, watched as the antelope he had painstakingly driven to the water entered the mouth of the crocodile. The author has something to say. Their outlook on life is different. One is a struggle type, the other is a retirement type. August 14th was the Chinese Valentine's Day. After receiving a notice from the publishing editor, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai's polar bear book would be pre-sold on the Chinese Valentine's Day. On August 7th, the publishing company, Bookfield Culture, would release specific pre-sales information. The official pre-sales would be officially announced on the 14th. As for the physical book, the artist's wife had drawn a stunning cover and illustration. The cover was of them in summer, and the poster was of them in winter. The company had done a very interesting job. Overall, it was very cute. Readers who needed it could pay attention to it and buy it offline later. The Chinese Valentine's Day trip had also ended. They had originally planned to go on a long trip, but the epidemic had been very serious recently. Everyone had to be careful when going out and pay attention to protection. Chapter 308. The hyena, who was frightened by the crocodile, ran back to the two leopards resentfully. When he was young, he had personally witnessed the hyenas in his tribe being eaten by crocodiles. To hyenas, crocodiles were invincible existences. Although hyenas gathered and dared to snatch the lion's food, they were helpless against crocodiles. Are you obedient now? The kind Yolashanda drank enough water and gave up his safe position to quench the hyena brothers' thirst. The other party was probably afraid of the danger by the water and had been timidly sticking out his dog head to test the water. Only when he was sure that there were no crocodiles around did he dare to drink quickly. He was so timid. Ao Daisai and Yolashanda had never been beaten up by crocodiles. It was good enough that they did not beat up crocodiles. When they were lions, they came in groups. The crocodiles that looked at people rarely provoked lions. Now that they were leopards, it was even more so. Leopards were crocodile killers. It was normal for them to fish up crocodiles from the water to eat every few days. Yolashanda licked the water stains on his mouth and stared at the water surface. He secretly planned to eat a crocodile feast when they grew stronger. The two leopards were like skinny teenagers now. Even though their bones had begun to take shape, they were not strong enough. Such two leopards would be coveted if they guarded a resource-rich territory. Therefore, they could not be lazy. At least, before entering the zoo, they could not forget what they had to do. The hyena followed behind dejectedly. The fierce sun and the defeat just now had more or less affected his mood. Returning to the shade of the tree, the leopard brothers scurried up the tree. The hyena also gave up on unnecessary efforts and enjoyed his afternoon nap in peace. Only sufficient sleep would bring him vitality. Exhaustion made him fall asleep immediately, and snoring leaked out of his nose. Yolashanda and A.O. Daisai thought, "Is there a mistake?" He fell asleep first again. They had an ominous feeling when they saw the hyena lying down. Indeed, in less than 2 minutes, the other party started snoring. Yolashanda, who had just closed his eyes, stood up from the tree pole and saw the hyena brothers sleeping below in an extremely indecent posture. Although they were speechless, they couldn't argue with the dog. That would be too narrow-minded. The best way was to sleep in another tree. Hyena, who felt a growing sense of security, woke up to find that his leopard companion was no longer on the tree. He looked stunned for a moment, then hurriedly got up and followed the group. Finding the leopard in the next tree, the hyena wagged its tail in relief, nodding and bowing like some domestic dog. Yolashanda, who had slept enough, saw that he was alone and was afraid of being abandoned at any time, so she went down the tree to play with him for a while. Realizing that the leopard was running towards it, the hyena turned its head back and whined humbly as it ran. Finally, it lay on the ground with its belly turned up and its tail clamped tightly. Yolashanda ran away after scaring him. This was a game. Yolashanda knew it, and so did hyena. On a hidden tree, A.O. Daisai rested his chin on his paws and relaxed as he watched Yolashanda and the hyenas chase each other on the grass. Suddenly, his ears twitched as if he heard an unusual sound. Yolashanda, who was on the ground, heard it too. He quickly said to A.O. Daisai in surprise, "It's the sound of a car. There's a camera team nearby. It can only be a team of this size, not poachers. Yes, let's go take a look." A.O. Daisai came down from the tree. His movements were very graceful and beautiful, and he didn't make any sound. Hyena's hearing was also very sensitive, but he was afraid of the sound of a car. When he heard the sound, he instinctively turned his head and wanted to run. However, halfway through, he turned back and saw that the leopard brothers were chasing after the car. This action obviously refreshed the hyena's worldview. He stood still, and it was very likely that he was in a dilemma. At this time, Yolashanda and A.O. Daisai didn't care about the hyena. They just wanted to see the situation and didn't plan to approach rashly. Zoos were also divided into different grades. If the other party didn't have enough resources to send them to a good zoo, they might as well continue to wander on the grassland. The back of a white pickup truck appeared in their vision. Because they were in the wild, the car drove very slowly. They could follow it at a leisurely pace. The target of this motorcade was also lions. They had been following a pride of lions on the grassland for a long time. If they didn't happen to meet them, they wouldn't deliberately take photos of other animal species. For example, groups of antelopes and cheetahs occasionally flashed by in the camera. These were all supporting roles that they took along the way. Of course, there are also some photographers who would do special features on other animals. Even if leopards and lions were not at the same level, they were still one of the 3 big cats on the grassland. The motorcade stopped and didn't dare to get too close to the pride of lions resting nearby. They were all quietly setting up equipment to take photos. They were also trying to cover their bodies with protective colors during the hot, dry season. There were many wild animal photographers in the world who didn't hesitate to take risks in order to take close-up photos of animals. However, even the craziest photographer didn't dare to go in front of lions. When they were focused on taking photos, they didn't expect that there would be 2 leopards behind them. Yolashanda and A.O. Daisai could only open their mouths and pant under the sun. The ground that was compacted by the tires over and over again was faintly burning their feet. They came to the first car that was parked. There was no one inside. They had probably all gone to the front to take photos. This was also a group of crazy photographers. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai continued to walk forward. At this time, someone finally noticed their beautiful figures. People were so surprised that their mouths were wide open. They quickly informed the people around them. "Look, what is that?" "It's a leopard." They looked very excited and a little scared. It was just one point. As a professional photographer who had been dealing with wild animals for a long time, people could see that these two leopards didn't show any signs of losing their temper. It wasn't like they had never encountered such a situation before. Sometimes, when camping in the wild, the leopards would jump on the roof of their car and spend the night with them. This made the photographers excited and scared. Of course, most of the leopards that did that were cheetahs. People rarely encountered leopards that took the initiative to approach them. This kind of mysterious and extraordinary beast was not as friendly as lions. "Should everyone prepare to escape," a photographer said in a low voice. However, he had already raised his camera and was secretly taking photos of the two leopards. If the leopards attacked from this distance, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape. From their accent and some clues in the car, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai could basically confirm which country this photographer team was from. This country was quite rich, but it was said that this country didn't take very good care of the animals in the zoo. One year, it was even reported in the newspaper that their zoo had a flood and the rescue was actually very slow. Thinking of this, they immediately lowered their heads. Of course, the zoo wasn't bad, didn't mean that these photographers weren't good. Being able to put their heads on their belts and do this job was mostly because they loved it to the extreme. Yolashanda walked slowly towards the curly-haired young man closest to him. The other party was so scared that his eyeballs almost popped out. He hurriedly hugged his camera and took a few steps back. But perhaps because he saw that the leopard wasn't in a hurry and didn't seem like it was going to hunt, his inner love for big cats forced him to muster up the courage to stand on the spot. Perhaps a miracle would happen. The photographer thought excitedly in his heart. Then his dream came true. This leopard actually came over to rub his hand. The young photographer was indescribably excited. Could he touch the leopard's head next? As he had just entered the industry and didn't have any experience, he couldn't help but look left and right for help. Very quickly, he received encouraging gestures from his seniors to touch the leopard bravely. This was a gift from the leopard. Don't be in disbelief. Some wild animals were friendly. Being able to have intimate contact with wild animals on the grassland was undoubtedly one of the highlight moments of a wildlife photographer. The encouraged young photographer finally dared to touch Yolashanda's head, then his neck and cheeks. "Oh my God, you're so cute. You're so good looking." It wasn't convenient to touch the leopard like this, so the photographer simply put down the camera on his shoulder and knelt on the ground to touch the leopard with both hands. This was a very dangerous move because the leopard could pounce on him and bite him to death at any time. But no one stopped him from taking the risk. They were willing to believe in this seemingly gentle leopard. They were even envious. Under the gaze of many pairs of eyes, the young photographer and the leopard hugged. The photographer himself was so excited that he was about to cry. How could there be such a cute big cat in the world? When the other party put his paws on his shoulder, he was so happy that he ascended to heaven. This was a wild leopard. "Great, this experience is great. Thank you for trusting me." "Oh my God." The surrounding people were also whispering, looking like they were ready to make a move. They were simply envious and exclaimed that their companion was lucky. "Why did you come to us? Are you thirsty?" In the process of hugging, the photographer found that the leopard was a little thin and its fur was not so smooth and gorgeous. It was obvious that this was not a healthy adult leopard. He couldn't help but sympathize with it. The kind photographer immediately took out water and food. They had brought good supplies, such as iced drinking water and fruit, and so on. This was an unexpected surprise for Yolashanda. He hurriedly called Ao Daisai over to eat. When he found that he could feed two wild leopards at the same time, the photographer's heart exploded. "Oh my God! Oh my God! This was a highlight." But this leopard obviously didn't like to be touched by people. It only accepted food. The photographer found that they were particularly interested in ice cubes, so he put half a bucket on the ground. They stuffed their heads in it to cool down and even chewed on the ice cubes. Slowly, the others also surrounded them. They were risking their lives to stroke the cat. Fortunately, Yolashanda was very friendly. He didn't mind letting these hard-working photographers be happy. Just like that, his paws were held in their hands and watched. In the end, they even used a tape measure to measure the data. These enthusiastic foreigners even wanted to kiss Yolashanda's forehead. Fortunately, they were stopped by A.O. Daisai in time. They could shake hands and take photos, but forget about the rest. After these people finished taking photos, they should go back. When they left, Yolashanda took a piece of watermelon with his mouth. The poor hyena brothers hadn't tasted watermelon yet. He brought a piece back for them to try. Actually, Hyena was nearby. He had the guts to follow, but didn't have the guts to approach. He should be helpless and tormented during this period. Fortunately, the two leopards came back and brought him strange food. Was it for him? Hyena stared blankly at the piece of watermelon on the ground, as if he couldn't believe that it was for him. The hyenas born and bred on the grassland had never eaten watermelon before, but no one could resist watermelon in summer. He ate the whole piece very preciously, including the skin. In the end, he licked his lips as if he hadn't had enough. At this moment, he was a happy hyena. Delicious, right? Yolashanda thought to himself. You've already surpassed 99% of the hyenas on the grassland. Come on. Now that night had fallen, they were all hungry. The two leopards led a hyena into the grass to fight for their next dinner. The author has something to say. It's not good not to go to the zoo. The title of the physical book hasn't been changed. It's still, Are You Going to Kill Me with Cuteness? The online title is Taobao, and the offline title is The Bookstore. The company will promote it on Weibo, where they can search for the title of the book on the online platform. Chapter 309. Now that he was injured and had enough food, he was not interested in killing this young polar bear. Xiao Qixi, who was hiding in the room, was very worried that A.O. Daisai would climb through the gap and cause trouble for him. Fortunately, the other party only stood quietly for a while and left without much interest. The gap in the wall might be a blind spot of the surveillance camera. The staff did not notice it for a while. This left Xiao Qixi with a hidden danger of being attacked by the neighbor next door. F***CK. He cannot sleep like this. In order to let himself have a good sleep, Xiao Qixi felt that it was necessary to remind the staff to pay attention to this gap. Therefore, he went there to wander after eating and tried to attract the staff's attention. However, Xiao Qixi was undoubtedly stepping on the edge of death because every time he appeared around the gap, A.O. Daisai would be attracted. In other words, even A.O. Daisai was attracted, but the staff still did not notice. That was too negligent. Did A.O. Daisai have to climb over to his side and bite him to death under its sharp fangs before the staff noticed that the wall had collapsed? Xiao Qixi imagined the state of his death. All the hair on his body stood up in fear. He believed that A.O. Daisai did not come over for the time being because its injuries had not healed and it was not suitable for it to climb over the wall. In 2 days, when the other party was more agile, it would definitely come over to kill him. As the saying goes, the one who strikes first gains the advantage. Xiao Qixi, who was full, felt that he should take advantage of the fact that A.O. Daisai had not recovered and wander over to attract the staff's attention, no matter how he thought about it. This plan seemed to be a suicide mission. The sun was warm this morning. Xiao Qixi leaned against the wall to peek at A.O. Daisai's situation. Half of the big guy's body was exposed outside. It was napping and basking in the sun. It seemed to be sleeping soundly. Compared to Xiao Qixi's snow-white fur, A.O. Daisai's fur was not as white. It was a little beige. Xiao Qixi thought about it and did not dare to act rashly. Forget it, forget it. He would wait and see. Fortunately, after a few days, A.O. Daisai was still not interested in killing Xiao Qixi. It did not even chase Xiao Qixi away when Xiao Qixi was peeping on the wall. This was not scientific. Over time, Even a layman like Xiao Qi could tell that Ao Daisai's condition was not optimistic. It seemed that it was not just a physical problem. Sure enough, he overheard the staff. Ao Daisai was not used to life at the rescue station and was a little emotionally. Chow chow chow. Chow 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 chow. Chow chow. Ao Chow Chow Chi. She held a fish in her mouth as she leaned against the wall to peek at her neighbor. Her neighbor did not seem to have much energy. Even when he noticed her, he merely laid on the snow and lifted his eyelids. Chow. Chow chow oh ao ao oh ao oh 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 ao chow. Chow chow could not rule out this possibility. However, Chow Chi felt that polar bears did not have such intelligence. Just as he was considering whether to throw the fish away and leave, Ao Daisai moved in the distance. The other party actually got up and slowly approached him. Ao Daisai's body was like a small iceberg. Although he was a little thin now, it did not affect his aura. Chow Chi was a little scared, but he could see that although Ao Daisai was looking at him with vigilance, he did not see the light of prey. This meant that Ao Daisai did not treat him as prey. Chow Chi looked calm on the surface, but he was actually panicking inside. He leaned on the wall and looked at the huge polar bear standing in front of him. He did not flinch. The polar bear's keen senses could judge the opponent's emotions and true intentions. Therefore, he tried his best to restrain his aura, even though he did not have any aura to speak of. Ao Daisai was as tall as the young polar bear lying on the wall. He stretched his neck and sniffed the male polar bear that appeared in his sight every day. Perhaps he was confused in his heart. After all, the polar bear cubs he encountered in the past never dared to wander under his nose. That was an act of seeking death. Chow Chi held the fish in her mouth and did not move. She allowed the polar bear's round and deep eyes to look at her. Speaking of which, the polar bear's eyes were very beautiful, big and round. After sniffing the little bear for a moment, Ao Daisai withdrew his curiosity and licked his mouth. His slow movements and dim eyes clearly made Chow Chi feel that he was unhappy. Chow Chi felt a little distressed. How should he put it? A 4-year-old polar bear should not have such eyes. He hoped that this polar bear would recuperate at the rescue station and then return to the wild to continue living. The injured Ao Daisai rarely walked outside. After being attracted by Chow Chi to walk around, he returned to his original place and continued to sleep in the sun. The polar bear's body was full of resistance to his current life. The fish that was still alive swayed its tail in Chow Chi mouth. Chow Chi seemed to have decided something. His 2 hind legs exerted force, and suddenly, with a loud bang, the broken wall under him fell down. F***CK. After all, no matter how young he was still a polar bear and weighed at least a few hundred kilograms. The big movement here attracted Ao Daisai's attention again. He lazily looked at the scene of the accident quietly. Chow Chi shook his thick fur and walked towards Ao Daisai with the fish in his mouth. At this time, his figure finally appeared in the surveillance video. The staff who saw him rubbed his eyes and thought that he had seen wrongly. Oh my God! Oh no! Yulashanda appeared in Ao Daisai's residence. He quickly informed his colleagues. Quickly think of a way to stop them from fighting. What? How'd he get there? The colleagues who came to watch the surveillance video were shocked. What is our little angel Yulashanda doing? Oh my God, he has a fish in his mouth? That's right. The people around him were all in disbelief. Is he trying to get on Ao Daisai's good side? It was very surprising that such a thing would happen to a polar bear. However, it was not completely impossible. Wait, let's observe Ao Daisai's reaction first. If he doesn't attack Yulashanda, it might be good for his emotional stability. A staff member said his thoughts with a serious expression. However, they also knew that this was very dangerous. If Ao Daisai attacked Yulashanda, the outcome would be very bad. As Chow Chi got closer and closer to Ao Daisai, the staff members in front of the surveillance video started to breathe rapidly. They were very nervous. Let's wait a little longer. Maybe there will be a different outcome. Chow Chi was also very nervous. However, humans could not see his nervousness with the naked eye. His thick fur allowed him to make a charmingly naive expression. People only saw him walk slowly to Ao Daisai and put the fish in front of him in a friendly manner. It was really unbelievable for a young polar bear to do such a thing. Could it be that Yolashanda thought that Ao Daisai was his mother? This seemed to be the only explanation. Ao Daisai, who did not have much energy, might be as confused as a human. It was obvious that this was the first time he was fed by a young polar bear. In their genes, only mothers would feed their children, and during mating, some male polar bears would give their food to the female. If it was a normal day, Ao Daisai would definitely be very passionate about food. This was because he had to survive in the wild and needed to eat anytime and anywhere to ensure his survival. But here, his mood fell to the bottom, and at the same time, he more or less lost his passion for food. However, the appearance of a little bear awakened his instinctive desire for survival. After all, other than the snow on the ground, this was the only familiar memory of Ao Daisai. It was a bear of his own kind. The staff members saw from the surveillance video that Ao Daisai lowered his head and picked up the fish. He put it between his two paws, put his paws on it, and then tilted his head to bite it. There was a round of applause in the surveillance room, and everyone was relieved. Xiao Qishi was very happy. This dispirited polar bear should eat more. After all, he had to eat enough to heal his injuries. A single fish was not even enough to fill the gaps between the polar bear's teeth. In just 1 minute, Otis had swallowed the fish that Xiao Qishi had brought. He licked the blood on his paws, and at the same time, there seemed to be some light in his eyes as he looked at Xiao Qishi. Seeing that he seemed to be about to get up, Xiao Qishi took a few steps back. "Hey, brother, what do you want to do?" he thought to himself. Later, he simply ran toward the collapse gap. He was so agile that he did not look like a bear. Ao Daisai looked at the back of the little polar bear and did not chase after it. After a while, he turned to the corner where the food was placed and ate all the fish in the trough. This change made the staff happy, and they began to discuss whether to rebuild the collapse gap. After repeated discussions, they felt that leaving the gap open might be good for Ao Daisai and Yolashanda. They might be able to become playmates to comfort each other. At this point, Xiao Qishi's plan was declared a failure. His original plan was to walk around to attract the attention of the staff, and then let the staff fill the gap for him. However, after a series of operations, not only did the gap become bigger, but it was also used as a tool bear, becoming Ao Daisai's playmate. Are humans serious? There was no such record in the history of polar bears. How could two adult male polar bears who were not related by blood become playmates? However, no matter how angry Xiao Qishi was, his residence and Ao Daisai's residence were still connected. This was an unchangeable fact. He stayed in his cabin for 2 days and found that the bear next door did not seem to care about him. So he gradually relaxed. Worry and curiosity finally defeated fear. 2 days later, Xiao Qishi wandered around the gap again with fish in his mouth, and then unexpectedly met Ao Daisai, who was strolling nearby. The moment the two sides looked at each other, the atmosphere was a bit tense and awkward. It was not a wise choice to look at the polar bear. It would make the other party think it was a provocation. If the other party suddenly rushed over, it would be over. Fortunately, Ao Daisai did not suddenly rush over. He approached the young polar bear very slowly, and his attitude was quite friendly. After several brief encounters, they were already very familiar with each other's smell. The author has something to say. "I was beaten up by my aunt yesterday. I'll do it again tonight." Chapter 310. Ao Daisai was poisoned when he closed his eyes to rest, but the drug did not take effect for a while. He lay on the ground and looked at Xiao Qishi with red eyes. Maybe he wanted to do something, but his body gradually lost strength, and he could only try to half open his eyes. Xiao Qishi cupped Ao Daisai's face with her mouth and made a low sound. It was a little like the sound of a cub. There was no other meaning, just to express her feelings of parting. Ao Daisai, who had always been very cold to Xiao Qishi, might have realized something at this time. Maybe, in short, he wanted to raise his neck and touch Xiao Qishi. but he did not succeed. When the staff came in to take A.O. Daisai away, they found Yolashanda curled up beside A.O. Daisai. This scene made them feel very sorry. Maybe this period of companionship had allowed these two polar bears to establish a deep friendship. Just the thought of it was cruel to separate them. However, the rescue station also had their own considerations. They would not put the two polar bears too far away. If they want to find each other, it would not be so difficult. Xiao Qishi followed A.O. Daisai's cage to the door and said goodbye to the other party in her heart. However, he also knew that the entire North Pole was so big that the chance of meeting the other party again was very small. Releasing a polar bear was a huge project. The rescue station wanted to follow the life of the rescued polar bear after it was released, so the staff would implant a GPS locator in the polar bear in advance, and then fly the polar bear to a place far enough away. This process alone might take 2 or 3 hours. A.O. Daisai was conscious during the transport process. After all, the effect of the anesthetic was very short, otherwise it would be life-threatening. The unfamiliar environment would definitely make it very uneasy, and it might even go berserk. This was all possible. Therefore, the cage had to be strong enough to withstand the tossing of an 800-kilogram polar bear. Fortunately, A.O. Daisai was very quiet on the road and did not increase the workload of the staff. The rescue station chose to release Otis on a small snow-covered island in the Arctic Ocean. Although the island had a name, there were too many islands around it. It was hard for the people to remember all of them. In short, there weren't many polar bears in this area. If they didn't wander too far, they wouldn't encounter each other. For close-range release, a strong net would be used to net the anesthetized polar bear, and then a helicopter would be used to directly hoist it over. This time, the release distance was longer, so A.O. Daisai stayed in the cabin until they arrived at the release location more than 800 kilometers away. The people parked the helicopter on the flat coast, and the crew started to work. They fired another shot at the A.O. Daisai. This big guy is really heavy. If we don't have a helicopter, we won't be able to move him. The cage with wheels was pushed down to the ground, and the cage was open from above. People tied a strong net to the helicopter and then used the helicopter to lift the polar bear out of the cage and put it on the ground. Hurry up and open the net. He might wake up. The crew ran on the shore and busied themselves. Before A.O. Daisai regained its aggression, they had to leave this place. The helicopter was still hovering in the sky, observing the polar bear on the ground. Is he awake? The crew radioed. Looks good, the people on the ground said. Oh, what a big guy with a strong body. Seeing that A.O. Daisai had woken up and was staggering forward, everyone was very happy. Ha, good luck. Goodbye, A.O. Daisai. I hope you won't encounter poachers again. After confirming that the polar bear was in good condition and observing it for a while, the helicopter left the island. After more than a month, A.O. Daisai returned to the wilderness that it was familiar with, but this was also a strange place for it. A.O. Daisai carefully confirmed that there were no other polar bears in this new environment. At least within a radius of 60 kilometers, it didn't smell any unfamiliar polar bears, which meant that this was an uninhabited place. If there was enough food in this area, it generally wouldn't leave this area to look for new territory. Of course, this was only in general. March to April was the breeding period for polar bears. Polar bears over 5 years old without cubs would enter the estrus period. They would go out to look for suitable targets, so they would travel long distances and move every day. The shortest distance was a few kilometers, and the longest distance was more than 20 kilometers. It was still in the second half of the breeding period, but A.O. Daisai was less than 5 years old this year. It would be another year, until next spring, when it would go into estrus. Polar bears that were strong enough would find a suitable target during their first estrus. If it didn't go well, it might be delayed for a year or two, or it might never find a target. The phenomenon of being single was not so new in the animal kingdom. It could be said that it was a very common phenomenon. Polar bears were 5 to 6 years old, which was equivalent to 17 or 18 years old for humans. So, strictly speaking, A.O. Daisai was also a juvenile bear. When it returned to the wild in the second half of spring, all it had to do was make sure that it had enough food, That was all. At this time, Xiao Qixi, who was staying at the rescue station, was enjoying life alone. Then it knew that it wouldn't be long before it was released. Summer is coming soon. Can Lashanda really survive in the wild? Obviously, a 1-year-old polar bear had no experience of summer alone. This summer would be particularly difficult for it. If it was set free, I think we should be rational. Think about it. It's the age when it should be learning survival skills. Keeping it in the rescue station won't do it much good, because a long time in captivity might cause Lashanda to forget all its memories of surviving in the wild, which would be even worse. If it couldn't be kept for a lifetime, it would be best to release it as soon as possible. I really can't bear to part with this cute little guy. It's so pure and friendly, yes. Lashanda's gentle temper was deeply rooted in people's hearts. No one could bear to send it away. But due to practical factors, they had no choice but to do so. A free world was the home of polar bears, even if they would eventually encounter danger and difficulties. Even so, people couldn't keep them in captivity in the name of love and protection. This wasn't the real core of animal protection. Xiao Qixi counted the time. After about 3 meals, which was about a day, he finally embarked on the journey back to nature. The rescue station chose the place for him to be released. It was more than 100 kilometers away from Daisai. This was a safe distance between polar bears. At such a long distance, they could no longer smell each other's scent. After Xiao Qixi woke up, the bear was quite confused, because, as a polar bear that had changed its home halfway, he didn't even have a day of survival experience in the wild. Well, everything around him was so unfamiliar that he had no clue. So, what should he do on the first day after returning to nature? The Arctic Circle was surrounded by a vast expanse of white, and the icebergs all looked the same. He could barely distinguish north from south, east from west, but it was useless. Xiao Qixi lay on the ice in a daze for a while. He felt that there was one thing that couldn't be delayed, and that was hunting. He was a newbie, and this thing had to be practiced. Otherwise, he would risk starving to death. It was said that polar bears only succeeded once out of 20 hunts on average. This probability sounded very tiring. Xiao Qixi looked down at the fat he had grown at the rescue station. He wondered how many days this fat could support him without eating. 20 times? Xiao Qixi felt that 40 times was enough for him. The wild was colder than the rescue station, and walking on the ice was also very tiring. Due to the helicopter visit just now, the surrounding animals should have hidden, so there was a very quiet feeling. But this was just a psychological feeling. In fact, the wind on the ice was very strong, and the sound of the sea could be heard in the distance. Perhaps this was the sound that animals were used to. However, as a human, Xiao Qixi couldn't help but feel lonely and helpless in this environment. There was only ice and snow, and it was too lonely. It was unimaginable. How did other polar bears live? Oh, no, other polar bears wouldn't have so many wild thoughts. Only humans would think so much of it. There was nothing that could be done about it. Xiao Qixi walked slowly to the shore alone, praying that he would meet a small seal basking in the sun on the way. But obviously, this required a lot of luck. Xiao Qixi didn't meet any seals basking in the sun along the way. Perhaps because he didn't know how to hide, the seals had already smelled the polar bear's scent and had already hidden. Even if he met a seal, so what? Seals were so cute. As a fake polar bear with human thoughts, Xiao Qixi felt that there was no way he could pounce on the seal and kill it immediately. That would be too cruel. After fully analyzing the pros and cons, Xiao Qixi felt that it wasn't a wise choice to go near the shore. Even if there were seals lying on the shore, he couldn't catch up with them. A rookie had to have the courage to admit that he was a rookie and face the bleak life of a bear. Only then could he break through and rebuild. Xiao Qixi used his keen sense of smell to search for the breathing holes of polar animals on the ice. On the inland ice, there were breathing holes not far away. This was where the marine animals under the ice breathed. They would swim up from time to breathe, and at the same time prevent the water from freezing. If Xiao Qixi had enough patience to wait here, there would be no lack of opportunities to hunt. However, the marine animals were very vigilant. They would choose a relatively safe hole to float up to breathe. Xiao Qixi waited by the hole for about 10 minutes. Finally, an animal floated up. It was a white whale. Xiao Qixi was stunned. The round-headed white whale looked at him in a daze. Let alone hunting, he was completely at a loss. The white whale's appearance was very cute. He believed that everyone was familiar with it. It could be seen in almost every aquarium. Most of the marine animals performing were also white whales. This thing was like a seal. Xiao Qixi couldn't kill it at all. Oh, he couldn't kill it either. They watched helplessly as the white whale swam up and down, its tail creating a splash on the surface of the water before disappearing without a trace. What Xiao Qixi didn't know was that the white whale was also one of the prey of the polar bear. The polar bear didn't care that the other party was a whale. As long as it was hungry, it would work hard to eat. The hyena brothers. Food and lodging are covered? Think about it. Chapter 3:11. The rain made the grassland green, and the bare branches a month ago now looked like a huge green umbrella. From afar, it felt like they were in a different world, but this wasn't a different world. It was just an African grassland where many wild animals lived. The photographers sitting in the car with cameras looked out of the window at the passing scenery. Suddenly, they seemed to see two leopards and a hyena walking leisurely in the grass. People probably thought that they were seeing things. Otherwise, how could they see leopards and hyenas getting along so well? They were enemies. The photographer from China was especially excited because he had long wanted to shoot leopards and make an album about leopards. Too many people had done lion albums, but the equally beautiful and fierce leopards were always ignored. The other photographers, no, it's just because leopards are difficult to shoot. The young man who had stopped to track the gang. Is it difficult? Didn't we get it now? They finally saw clearly that the animals following behind the two leopards were indeed hyenas. They didn't look old, about 2 to 3 years old. The two leopards had smooth fur and well-proportioned muscles. They looked to be in good shape. In that case, what had prompted them to team up? Capable leopards liked to live alone and would only get close to the opposite sex during the short period of breeding. The two that had appeared were males. Logically speaking, they should be brothers from the same nest. Then what about the hyenas? Unlike the thin male hyenas in most hyenas, the hyena with the leopards was strong and fleshy with bright fur. It looked like it was living a good life. This strange combination attracted the attention of the photographer's audience. They had already started discussing letting at least one person be in charge of the album. The young man who was very passionate about leopards volunteered to fight. He and another colleague were in the same car and would be in charge of shooting leopard from today onwards. That was great. This was the legendary gift of a pillow when one was sleepy. Yolashanda was wondering how to not lose the car and help the hyena brothers find a new home. Since the photographer was interested in them, it couldn't be better. Next, they could focus on helping the hyena brothers find a new home. The hyena brothers, who had been thin and weak before, had been raised to be white and fat. To put it arrogantly, who wouldn't want such strong men? Ao Daisai, do you smell hyenas nearby? Except for the one behind us. Yolashanda asked as he sniffed. He had never dreamed that they would one day take the initiative to search for hyena's location. This operation had already surpassed 99% of the leopards on the grassland, right? Ao Daisai stopped focusing on exploring and nudged his partner. I haven't smelled anything yet, but there's no rush. Okay. The couple whispered to each other, and the hyena brothers behind them thought they were looking for prey. Not to mention the hyena brothers. Even the photographer who was observing them through binoculars thought so. Damn it. Usually, when I don't want to look for hyenas, they always appear in groups. Now I can't find them even if I want to. Yolashanda muttered to himself. Suddenly, he sighed and said, why do we have to go through so much trouble to find them? Can't we just use food to attract them? Usually, they would stay in a safer place to eat. This time, they walked a little further and ate a little slower. In theory, they could solve the problem. This idea was a little risky. However, would Ao Daisai be afraid? As long as it was something Yolashanda wanted to do, he would almost agree. The next step was to look for prey. The three furry animals swaggered into unfamiliar territory. What did it matter? They could already fight adult leopards now. They could even fight lone lions. The hyena brothers were confused. From afar, they saw the giraffe family of three standing beside a tree and eating leaves leisurely. Yulashanda let out a greedy sound because he would never be able to eat a giraffe in his life. Boo-hoo! Ao Daisai had no choice. Due to their physical limitations, the giraffe's weight was too much for them. Even with the hyenas, it was useless. The hyena brothers were very pragmatic. They did not even look at the giraffe. They only sniffed the grass and looked for prey that they could catch, such as wild boars. They followed the smell and found a wild boar cave. They were extremely excited to confirm that there was a wild boar inside. Then, they cried out to attract the leopard's help. What's wrong with the hyena brothers? Yulashanda and Ao Daisai walked over to take a look. They were stunned when they saw the wild boar cave. How much meat could a wild boar have? Did the hyena brothers have to do that? They should go catch the zebra. However, there was indeed a wild boar inside. They all saw the grayish-black skin. It was too torturous for the hyena brothers to see but not eat. Unfortunately, his claws were not as good as the leopard's. If he reached in from the hole, not only would he not be able to grab the wild boar's skin, he might even be bitten by the wild boar. The two leopards stayed with the hyenas for a moment before getting up and leaving with little interest. Their figures disappeared into the bushes. The photographer who was following them was not optimistic. He felt that if they gave up on the prey in front of them so easily, they would never be able to find any more. The people who worked on the grassland knew very well how difficult it was for wild carnivores to survive. Fortunately, their doubts were unnecessary. After following the two leopards for more than 10 minutes, they saw a group of gazelles. This type of gazelle was relatively small and agile. They were usually the food of cheetahs. Only the champion cheetahs had a chance of catching them. It was impossible for the hyenas, but the leopards were a little uncertain, so the photographer was still not optimistic. The prey was relatively small. After a short exchange, the two leopards decided to hunt one each. The camera could see them slowly approaching the central area. The hyena, who did not dare to move, looked up from the grass. Perhaps he also knew that he had no advantage in hunting this kind of little gazelle. A trace of anxiety and helplessness could be seen in his eyes. The two leopards were focused on the prey they had chosen. They did not pay much attention to the hyenas as long as they did not help. The scene under the photographer's lens seemed to have been paused. Only the tips of the grass swayed in the wind. The unknown grass was sometimes bent down from the pressure and sometimes brushed against the beautiful faces of the leopards. Looking at their crawling movements, they seemed to be relaxed on the surface, but they were actually full of explosive power. Their minds had not relaxed for a moment. The photographer's hand that was holding the camera was sweating. He could not wait to see the results. At the same time, he wanted to capture the beautiful and fierce figures of the leopards as they hunted. A slightly stronger wind blew over, causing Yulashanda's ears to tremble. At the same time, the gazelles that were eating grass nearby narrowed their eyes. This was a signal. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai jumped up at the same time. They mobilized all their muscles to help them run at their fastest speed and fly towards their respective prey like arrows. The photographer was stunned. For a moment, he did not know which side to shoot. Fortunately, they had two cameras. However, there was another main character on the scene. He had also made a move. Although the hyena knew that he was not fast enough, he still tried to chase after a gazelle with all his might. After Yulashanda and Ao Daisai succeeded, they lay on their prey and looked up. Only then did they realize that the hyena brothers were chasing after their prey. Ao Daisai was closer to the other party. He got up without hesitation and jumped towards the panicked gazelle. He had a chance to kill it now, but he did not do so. Ao Daisai forcefully slowed down the gazelle's escape speed until the hyena could catch up. He jumped up and bit the gazelle's neck. Even though both sides were about the same weight, the gazelle still dragged the hyena for a while until it ran out of strength, and the hyena, who did not let go after biting it, pressed it down. This way, each of them had a prey. The photographers were stunned by the scene in front of them. It turned out that this hyena was really the leopard's companion, and they had a good relationship. This was the first time the hyena brothers had killed their own prey. He looked too happy. He kept wagging his tail and licking the gazelle's flesh. He even raised his head and made a sound, as if he was calling Ao Daisai and Yulashanda to eat. Ao Daisai, who already had prey, brought the gazelle to Yulashanda's side and could not be bothered with him. Hence, the two leopards stayed in the shade and enjoyed the food while the hyena hissed at an antelope outside. The hyena's voice just now sounded like he was calling for his companions to eat. These few smug cries did not call the leopards over, but attracted the nearby hyenas. They swarmed over. That was great. This was exactly what Yulashanda and Ao Daisai wanted. TSK. When the hyenas saw how capable the hyena brothers were, they would absorb talents at any time. However, things were out of Yulashanda's expectations. The hyena brothers realized that the hyenas were swarming over. Their expressions were actually filled with panic and fear. Like a leopard, he carried his prey up the tree without a word. Yulashanda and his wife. The photographer. Why was this hyena so angry? The hungry hyenas arrived at the scene. The smell of fresh meat made every hyena drool, and they kept barking at the leopards on the tree. Of course, there were also some under the hyena brothers' tree, or even more. The hyenas, watching him, probably did not understand why this brother did not come down to share. Was it fun for a dog to eat up there? How scary. Surrounded by so many strong hyenas again, the hyena brothers ate meat in fear on the tree while paying attention to the situation. From the looks of it, he did not intend to make new friends at all. This scene gave Yulashanda a headache. He asked Ao Daisai uncertainly, "Did our plan fail?" Even if they encountered a good hyena pack, the hyena brothers had no intention of joining. Was he stupid? What future did he have with two leopards? Did he not want to marry a wife and have children? Yulashanda looked at the female hyena in the hyena pack, then glared at the hyena brothers on the tree next door in disappointment. If I had known, I wouldn't have taught him to climb the tree. Ao Daisai was more patient and said lazily, "Let's wait and see." When a group of hyenas swarmed over just now, the hyena brothers' first reaction was naturally to run because those were unfamiliar hyenas. When the other party calmed down, there might be a different outcome. Under the perseverance of the hyenas, they finished eating the antelope, but they could only wait on the tree for the time being and did not dare to go down. The hyena brothers seemed to know that the group was in trouble. No one knew what he was thinking, but in the end, he went down with the leftover remains in his mouth. A group of hyenas chased him away noisily. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai stood up, worried that something would happen to the hyena brothers. "He gave us a chance to escape, but I'm worried that he'll be beaten up," Yulashanda said. "Let's go." Ao Daisai jumped down and said, "With us around, it's not a group fight. It can only be considered a fight." They would not watch helplessly as the hyena brothers became the sacrificial lamb to lure the tiger away from the mountain. The author has something to say. Hyena brothers, terrifying hyenas. I'll help you lure them away. 2 p.m. Chapter 312. The shadow of being bullied by his own kind since he was young always shrouded the hyena brothers' hearts. Just like how he was afraid when he first saw a group of hyenas, he was still afraid even when he jumped down from the tree. However, he did not hesitate. He ran with the remains of the antelope in his mouth and only let go cleverly when he ran far enough. At this moment, a portion of the hyenas swarmed the remains, but a portion of the hyenas still chased after the hyena brothers who were alone. The hyenas did not smell a familiar scent on him. Perhaps they knew that he was a hyena and did not let him go. There was no reason in front of a group of hungry beasts. Countless salivating mouths bit at the hyena brothers. At this moment, they did not treat them as their own kind, but prey that could be hunted, just like how they faced the leopard. The hyena brothers had never thought of fighting with the hyenas. His only thought was to run faster, just like how he only knew how to run when he was bullied since he was young. Recently, his speed was already very fast. At least, he would not be caught up as easily as when he was young. However, a few hyenas still caught up to him and bit him. Roar! The hyena brothers turned their heads to resist and let out sounds of resistance. They also hid their butts down to prevent the hyenas from attacking their anuses. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai easily identified the location of the hyena brothers from the noise. They were quite anxious. The hyena brothers were being attacked. This group of hungry hyenas. However, it was also true. The hyena brothers were now smooth, and their mental appearance was incompatible with the other hyenas. They were not so easy to accept. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai skipped over the lagging hyenas and jumped to the front. They each bit the back of a hyena's neck and tore them away from the hyena brothers. Seeing that the leopard had arrived, the hyena brothers, who had been bullied until they buried their heads and cried out, seemed to have come to life. Their eyes were sparkling. The ferocious hyena also stared at the leopard and changed direction to bite it. When he was bitten, the hyena brothers did not show their might. Now that he realized that the other hyenas were going to bite the leopard, he did not care about his timidity and fear. He fiercely pounced on the other party, not allowing the hyena to bite the leopard. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai were deeply attracted by the sounds of the fierce battle. After they finished off their opponents, they joined in the rescue operation to rescue the hyena brothers. This was the first time they had fought after growing up. The two leopards had no scruples. Other than the hyena brothers, they would bite any dog they saw. The weak hyenas had their necks bitten off mercilessly because the hyenas were merciless and did the same to their brothers. The photographers who followed them were shocked by the scene in front of them. They saw two leopards and a hyena fighting against a group of hyenas and not being at a disadvantage. The two leopards, in particular, were exceptionally brave and ferocious. Every move they made gave off a clean and neat feeling, as if the god of death had descended. It made one's blood boil. While fighting, they also had to protect their hyena companions. Their cooperation was too good. At first, their hyena companions looked a little unconfident and did not dare to fight the hyenas head-on. They even knew how to dodge when they were bitten. Later on, the leopard gave him full of confidence. In order to protect his companions, he finally bared his fangs and counterattacked ferociously. Furthermore, he became crazier and crazier. He bit the neck of a hyena tightly, and the two of them fell to the ground together. He used his two front claws to hug the other party's body tightly, and his two hind legs kept kicking the other party's abdomen, causing the other party to cry out in pain. This madness continued until their eyes turned red from killing. In the end, the hyenas that had been killed until they were in a mess fled. The hyenas with red eyes from killing still chased after them and bit them. His madness and bravery stunned Yulashanda and Ao Daisai. They thought to themselves that it was indeed terrifying to provoke hyenas. They made a sound and called the hyena brothers back. Stop chasing. After a full 5 minutes, they saw the hyena brothers limping back. Good Lord, their fur was messy as if they had a skin disease. They had been raised for nothing these days. There were wounds of all sizes on their bodies. There was even one on their forehead. Oh no, they were disfigured. Wouldn't it be even harder to find a wife now? Brother Gangster, I'll call you Scar in the future. Yulashanda sighed. He remembered that there were definitely not so many wounds just now. He had already told them to stop chasing, but they still chased. The hyena brothers, whose new name was Scar, returned to the leopard's side and lay down to lick their wounds. Looking at his appearance, Yulashanda and Ao Daisai no longer hoped that he could go out and become independent. Scar is too stupid. If he's still like this after integrating into a new tribe, he'll be the first to die. Yulashanda muttered because his heart ached. As a wild beast, being too emotional would not end well. He secretly hoped that Scar would be more selfish and cold-blooded and not sacrifice himself for others easily. You can't blame him, Ao Daisai said. After observing Scar's reaction when he encountered the hyenas twice, he had already guessed that Scar was often bullied by the hyenas. Hence, he said to Yulashanda, Scar doesn't want to go with the hyenas. He's not used to it. Then what should we do? They can't keep following us. We're going to the zoo, Yulashanda said and suddenly paused. Right, they could keep following them. Maybe because of their strange combination, it would be easier to bring them back. The more Yolashanda thought about it, the more reasonable it seemed. Hee, that's not impossible. I remember that there are hyenas in the zoo too. You can get married in the zoo too. Aodisai, yes, that's indeed possible. Moreover, they thought about it. It was difficult to cheat someone with smooth fur. Scar's miserable state was just right. They could pretend to be pitiful. Yolashanda moved to Scar's side and looked at him with calculating eyes. Scar, do you know that your good days are coming? Scar thought that the leopard brothers were concerned about him. He licked his wounds and wagged his tail hard, as if to say, I'm fine. Yolashanda, don't worry. We'll take care of your meals while you're recuperating. We'll definitely let you eat and drink well. First of all, they had to find a suitable place to rest. The ground was full of hyenas' remains, which would probably attract other carnivores soon. After Scar rested for a while, they opened up a path and left. Yolashanda took the lead, and Aodisai brought up the rear. This spirit of helping each other touched the photographer. They were also very worried about Scar's situation. It was too dangerous to be injured on the grassland. It was almost fatal. Fortunately, this hyena was lucky. He had two very reliable companions to protect him. During the process of walking, Yolashanda and Aodisai also noticed the photographer's presence. This was just right. They could start to pretend to be pitiful. Yolashanda came first. As he walked, his left hind leg became limp. It was very sudden and without warning. Worried that Aodisai would be sick, he hurriedly asked in a low voice, Are you injured? Yolashanda, Sure, I'm pretending. There's a photographer taking pictures of us. You should pretend too. Aodisai. It was not that he did not want to listen to the little cutie's instructions, but the key was that they still had to hunt later. Wasn't it a little unreasonable for a lame leg to succeed in hunting? That was true, so Yolashanda did not force him. He only suggested that Aodisai pretend to be weak, such as sticking out his tongue and panting. Wouldn't that ruin his image too much? Aodisai had always been cool and handsome. He rarely showed his weak and sloppy side. He could not do it. At most, he would be a little dejected. Then be dejected. Yolashanda lowered his request again and reluctantly agreed. At the same time, he pretended to be limp even more overboard. Scar, who was really in pain, looked at him with concern. The situation of this team made the photographer's heart flutter. It was over. The two leopards were not in good condition either. The young photographer, who loved leopards deeply, was very sad. He knew too well what this meant. This meant that the three wild animals would die at any time. How could this be? They defeated more than 10 to 20 hyenas. They're already very powerful. Ordinary leopards rarely face hyenas head-on. They usually escape if they can. That's why I'm even more sad. Well, loyal leopard and hyena. I really hope that they can continue to survive. Sigh. Let's continue following them. A qualified wildlife photographer needed to adhere to his professionalism. It was better to adapt to these things as early as possible. As soon as they left the messy battlefield, a group of lions smelled the scent and came over. Lions are not picky about food and did not even let go of the hyena's remains. They lay on the ground and started eating. Cheetahs would not eat food like this. They despised hyenas for not tasting meat. A group of baboons hid on the branches and watched as the lions cleaned up the hyena's remains. They seemed to be a little envious. When the leopards were still around, they did not dare to go down. After the leopards left, lions came. The baboons, who were also carnivores, would never be the first to pick up the leftovers. They might be able to pick up some of the remains left behind by the lions. After a fierce fight, the two leopards and one dog came to the river to drink water. They were all tired. After drinking, they hid under the shade of a tree by the river to rest. The photographer was very anxious. It was too dangerous here. He thought that the three injured guys should hide a little more secretly and not blatantly lie here. Scar, who was full of a sense of security, lay beside the two leopards and slept soundly. Between Yolashanda and Aodisai, one of them had to be awake to keep watch. Sleep. Aodisai looked at Yolashanda, who could not even open his eyes, and did not hesitate to stretch out his paws to be a pillow for him. Yolashanda was indeed sleepy. Before he fell asleep, he forced himself to finish saying, "I'll sleep for a while and wake up before sunset." Ao Daisai did not need to do that. He quickly licked him to sleep and even let out a sexy, snoring sound from his throat. Seeing this, the photographer could not help but shout in his heart, "Isn't this too good?" Of course, he had to take over. Ao Daisai was not made of iron. Short sleep was a big cat's ability. They could replenish their energy after sleeping for a while. Yolashanda woke up on time within the predicted range and forced Ao Daisai to close his eyes to rest. Otherwise, he would bite him. Bite me? Ao Daisai was not afraid at all. Not only that, he even bit Yolashanda's ear. The two leopards with smooth fur rolled on the ground. They pounced on each other, and their movements became bigger and bigger. Fortunately, they still remembered that there was an injured person beside them. After playing for a while, they stopped. Yolashanda pressed on Ao Daisai and said, "Okay, if you continue playing, you'll wake Scar up." Under the little cutie's strong request, Ao Daisai reluctantly closed his eyes and rested for 20 minutes before going to hunt. As Yolashanda was lame, he should be the only one hunting later. After all, he had to act to the end. "Scar, you're all acting. I'm the only one who is real QAQ." Chapter 313. 20 minutes later, the sound of Ao Daisai getting up to hunt woke Scar up. Even though he was not feeling well, he got up and wanted to join the hunt. It was late. Maybe they could have dinner if they worked hard. The setting sun hung on the horizon, shining on the river, making it seem as if the whole river was orange. The color of the leopard merged with the sky and the earth. His figure in the camera was amazing and convincing. Now, he was the only healthy one left in the group. All hope was on him. After telling Scar and Yolashanda to leave, Ao Daisai embarked on the hunting journey alone. His calm and generous temperament not only shocked the cameraman, but also the leader that Scar did not dare to resist. The hyena, who wanted to get some warmth after being injured, carefully approached the other leopard that used to play with him and made a gesture of seeking comfort. Yolashanda raised his paw and touched Scar's head. He did not stop the other from rubbing his head against his own. Such a warm scene touched the cameraman. He did not expect that they would be able to build such a deep relationship. Then, the humans began to worry about the leopard that went out to hunt alone. Would he be able to come back safely? This was really too dangerous. The two left behind could still escape when they encountered danger. The cameraman, who was more worried about the other leopard, changed their position and followed the lone hero. This move was destined to shock them. Ao Daisai, who was not favored, walked steadily. From the outside, one could not tell that they were in a difficult situation. Their eyes were still very determined. What was strange was that he ignored the herbivores that came to drink water around him and went further away. Perhaps this was the meaning of shooting a documentary. Every wild animal's survival was not static. They had their own feelings and their own personalities. The brave ones who could survive to the end on this grassland had a legendary life. The leopard came to a quiet, shallow beach. The riverbed was divided into several streams and flowed quietly. A crocodile that looked like it had just eaten was resting in the shallow beach. When the leopard stared at the crocodile, the cameraman understood that the big cat had chosen dinner for himself and his companions. But this was really crazy. It was one thing for leopards over 5 years old to hunt crocodiles with rich hunting experience, but the one in front of him looked no more than 3 years old. Its physique was not even as strong as an adult leopard, but it had its eyes on a strong crocodile. This was a risky move. If they caught it, the 150 kilograms of crocodile meat would be enough to fill their stomachs. It seemed that everything was for the sake of his companions. Ao Daisai? Question mark. No, I can do it. Although he had never caught a crocodile before, he was never afraid of this kind of stupid water monster. In terms of attack speed, who could compare with a feline? The water had a certain amount of resistance. The time it took for the crocodile to open its mouth was enough for the Ao Daisai to snatch it away. Before this, his movements were still very cautious. He crouched down and raised his head to observe the terrain. He slowly circled to the back of the crocodile from afar and patiently approached inch by inch. The cameraman was so scared that he didn't dare to move. He was afraid that his movements would affect what was happening at the moment. The crocodile, who was half submerged in the water, had no idea what was going on around him. He opened his mouth and allowed a bird with a sharp beak to feed in his mouth. The sensitive bird suddenly flew away, but the drowsy crocodile still had his mouth open. The leopard was already very close to him. Seeing that he was underestimating the enemy, it hesitated for a moment and unceremoniously bit him. The still scene was suddenly broken. The crocodile, who was still leisurely enjoying himself, suddenly shook his head and tail violently, splashing a large amount of water. However, his neck had already been bitten by the leopard. Other than being ruthlessly dragged away, he couldn't do anything to resist. The cameraman in the distance was stunned. Just like that, it was done. The 150 kilograms of crocodile meat was in their hands. This was easier than chasing an antelope. In an instant, the sympathy the humans had for this small group in distress disappeared when the other party easily snatched the crocodile away. Quickly accept reality. They were so powerful that they didn't need sympathy. At this time, Yulashanda still didn't know that his acting was in vain. If he knew, he might cry. Seeing that Ao Daisai came back with a big crocodile in its mouth, Yulashanda and Scar were surprised and excited. It was a crocodile. They had been eating prey on land for a long time, and they had long wanted to try the spicy strips in the water. This was great. Yulashanda was so happy that he forgot to pretend to be a cripple. He walked to Ao Daisai and couldn't wait to skin the crocodile. You caught the crocodile so quickly. You're amazing. He thought that he would have to wait for a while. Crocodiles are easy to catch. Ao Daisai felt that there was nothing amazing about it. He said honestly, you can do it too. Crocodiles like to stay on the shore and not move. It's easier than chasing an antelope. Yulashanda was eager to try. Well, I'll try another day. Unlike them who were naturally not afraid of crocodiles, in Scar's heart, crocodiles were as scary as lions. Now that he saw his companion hunting a crocodile, Scar kept patting the other party's head with his claws. Of course, the dying crocodile couldn't jump up and bite the hyena. It could only sullenly become the other party's dinner. The taste of crocodile meat was similar to chicken. Yulashanda was very satisfied and ate until he was full. Scar was also full. After dinner, he still held the crocodile's head and gnawed on it. Late at night, they left the wreckage on the ground and looked for a place to stay for the night. The same went for the photographers. They needed to find a place to stay for the night. Generally, they slept directly in the car, which was safer and more comfortable. Of course, there were some bold photographers who set up tents in the wild or lay in sleeping bags in the open. This required a certain amount of courage. Otherwise, there might be lions and leopards squatting next to them in the middle of the night. Because there were more equipment, the two photographers drove a small truck. They slept in the front of the truck and in the back of the truck. The young man who loved leopards slept in the back of the truck. In order to get some fresh air, he didn't lock one of the doors. He felt that there shouldn't be any wild animals on the grassland that would open the door. However, if he encountered a snake that sneaked in to play with him, then there was nothing he could do. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the three energetic furry animals woke up and had nothing to do. So they walked to the photographer's truck. The smell of instant noodles and ham lingered in the air. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai thought, Lautan pickled cabbage noodles, instant noodles companion. Yulashanda, who was gluttonous, jumped into the truck. When he was moving in the truck, he didn't step on the sleeping young man at all. This was the natural talent of felines. He found instant noodles companion, a type of ham sausage. There was a whole box of it. He thought for a moment, picked one up, and threw it outside. Scar immediately jumped up and caught it. Although he didn't know what it was, he knew after catching it that it was delicious food. Scar was coaxed by a ham sausage just like that. He didn't know that there was a lot of delicious food in the truck. He also didn't notice that the two leopard brothers had entered the truck and were very bold to directly sweep through the truck. The young man, who was very tired from carrying the camera all day, heard a rustling sound in his daze. His scalp immediately went numb, and he forced himself to open his eyes immediately. What was that sound? Could it be that a snake had really slipped in? This guess made his hair stand on end, and he became even more awake. God, when he saw the two leopards lying at his feet eating, his eyes widened and his heart almost jumped out. How could it be? Was this a dream? He was surrounded by beautiful big cats in the middle of the night. The legendary experience of the predecessors had come to him so quickly. If he was frightened a second ago, then in the next second, the cameraman's mood suddenly turned into excitement and surprise. It didn't matter if he was still alive or not. As long as he could get close to an African leopard, it was worth it. Although he thought so, the photographer still didn't dare to move. He slightly propped up his upper body and observed the two familiar leopards. They seemed to be the two from the day. One of the leopard's ears shook, as if it already knew that he was awake and was looking at it. However, it didn't turn back to look at him, nor did it make any vigilant or aggressive moves. The photographer breathed a sigh of relief and then looked at what exactly they were eating. Could it be that they dragged a small animal up for a meal? After taking a closer look, he realized that it was a false alarm. The two big cats didn't drag a small animal up for a meal. They were eating all kinds of snacks that he treasured. The photographer's heart collapsed. My ham sausage, my big drumstick. These were all their lives in the African grassland. Just as he was painfully scratching his head, the face of a hyena poked in and skillfully took a ham sausage from the leopard. The photographer, "You guys are really close, I never doubted it." Faced with this situation, the photographer immediately sent a message to his colleague at the front of the car, in case the colleague panicked and had a conflict with the wild animals. It turned out that his colleague had also woken up and heard the movement in the back of the car, but he didn't dare to move for fear of causing an attack. The photographer was very brave. "They look very friendly, so they probably won't attack us." His colleague thought that he was crazy about leopards. At this time, Yolashanda stopped whining about other people's snacks and said to himself, "Okay, it's not easy to be a photographer in the wild. Leave some for them." These were all brought all the way from China, so they were rare items. After eating, Ao Daisai stayed where he was and licked his paws. He looked very satisfied because he hadn't eaten snacks for a long time. Yolashanda lowered his head and cleaned up the crumbs in front of him. He had eaten too wildly before, so there might have been some fish that had slipped through the net. Oh, sure enough, he soon found a piece of salted chicken and ate it happily. The photographer's gaze alternated between Big Cat number 1, who was licking his paws and washing his face, and Big Cat number 2, who was licking the wrapping paper. Both of them were so cute and beautiful, and he could tell that the one licking his paws was the one that caught the crocodile, so it had a cooler personality. The one licking the wrapping paper was the one that liked to play with hyenas, so it was more easygoing. After some mental preparation, the photographer risked his life to take a picture with the camera. This movement attracted the attention of Big Cat number 2. It stared at the camera without any discomfort. Its two pupils were round and made a gurgling sound, which meant that it was in a good mood. The photographer pressed the shutter crazily, and then he was curious about Big Cat number 1's reaction, so he moved the camera over. At this moment, he saw a pair of beastly eyes staring at him, as if they had been secretly watching him for a long time. The calm eyes made his heart tighten. The frightened photographer quickly turned the camera. This time, the face that appeared in his field of vision was no longer the intimidating eyes. Scar was timid, so he disappeared out of the door with a whoosh. The photographer was also timid, because he had seen Scar go crazy. Scary hyenas. The author has something to say. Today's words are also Little Bear's physical information. The first physical book, Are You Going to Kill Me with Cuteness? The Polar King, will be available on August 14th at 7 p.m., including new chapters. It will be sold in Xiangxue, Wanbao, Boku, Tianyu, Feng and Song TV stores, as well as Dangdang and Jingdong. For specific information, please see Shutian Culture. Chapter 314. It was not even 6 o'clock in the morning but the sky on the grassland was already bright. They could see each other clearly in the carriage. This was a wonderful atmosphere. Whether it was for wild animals or for photographers in the wild, a distance of 0.5 meters was a wonderful distance. It was unusual and unsafe, and could only be achieved by having a sense of friendliness with each other. Every time this kind of safe, close contact happened on the grassland, it would bring a sense of satisfaction and emotion. You know, I want to be close to you. I know you mean no harm. We are all eager for the wonderful contact that is about to happen. The moment they looked at each other, the photographer vaguely understood the leopard's greeting from its snoring. I am very easygoing. Really? The young man with a tense Eastern face could not believe his intuition. But he really liked leopards. After some psychological preparation, he resolutely raised his hand and slowly touched the leopard's back. Leopards were also known as gold leopards. Their bodies were covered with gorgeous patterns, and they got their name because their spots resembled ancient copper coins. The young man who observed the leopard at close range said that the ancients did not lie to him. The leopard was really noble, beautiful, and strong. Feeling the human's fingers on his back, transmitting a cautious excitement, Yulashanda casually shook his back muscles, and the smooth satin fur slipped away from the human's hand. The young man was shocked and then realized that he was too timid. He smiled and continued to touch. While they were interacting with each other, Otis stood by the side, wagging his tail gently as he stared at them. Touch the back. That was the bottom line. If his hands dared to be dishonest, he would make this human regret it. He was very glad that the young man was very honest. No matter how much time passed, he only dared to touch the back and did not dare to use force. That was enough. Many photographers did not touch wild animals until they retired. He was very lucky. The atmosphere was very good. Yulashanda let the other party have his fun, then got up and left the carriage, because they were going to find Scar. The photographer had eliminated the fear in his heart. He informed his colleagues to quickly bring the equipment with him and continue to follow the leopard. They had a feeling that this would be an unusual album. The morning wind was still very cool. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai walked slowly side by side. Their strong muscles made people feel inexplicably at ease. The two leopards' heads leaned against each other. When they were tired of each other, Ao Daisai hesitated and reminded them, "Is your leg better?" Yulashanda thought doubtfully, "My leg has never been bad." "Wait, it should be bad now." "Oh no, is it the left leg or the right leg?" "Left front leg." Ao Daisai's way. "Okay, front leg's left leg." A certain leopard began to limp again. Simple humans would not suspect that wild animals on the grassland would pretend to be limping. After all, this was not beneficial to them. People pitied them even more than before because they had been friendly with them before. No one would dislike friendly children. Scars is scars, scars is butts. The baboons that lived in the trees were extremely ferocious. Hunting a lone hyena was a piece of cake for them. At dusk and dawn, they also had to be wary of the appearance of large pythons. If they were not careful, they might be dragged away by those tall and strong men. Scar, who had run far away in one breath, calmed down. Perhaps he had also sensed that he was in danger. He looked around in a panic and resolutely turned back. This action was like throwing a piece of meat into a pot of oil. Immediately, the baboons in the forest were in an uproar. They all shouted and chased after Scar. Male hyenas were not strong, and any adult baboon on the tree was heavier than them. It could be said that baboons were the most underrated beasts on the grassland. Their method of hunting other animals was very fierce and cruel. Two strong male baboons swung down from the tree and reached out to grab Scarface's hind legs. If they succeeded, Scarface would be torn in half very quickly. This was a common hunting method used by baboons. The sounds of baboons hunting could be heard from the forest, and the photographers were so scared that they didn't dare to approach. They all knew that baboons were also very interested in hunting humans. This kind of animal made people's scalps tingle, and they were terrified from the bottom of their hearts. The two leopards rushed in without hesitation. Their running posture was like two arrows. The photographers quickly adjusted their equipment to avoid missing any frames. Yulashanda couldn't care less about pretending to be crippled. He rushed to Scar's side as fast as he could, bit the baboon that was pulling at Scar's hind legs, and flew out together. With a bang, the strong baboon was thrown into a tree by him and cried out in pain. The photographers couldn't help but shout in their hearts, "Too cool. You can still fight so well with a crippled leg. Leopard YYDS." A.O. Daisai chased away a few baboons around him in one breath. When these baboons saw the two leopards arrive, they immediately let go of Scar and fled into the trees. However, climbing trees was not a unique skill. Leopards were also experts in climbing trees. A.O. Daisai chased after one of the baboons. He followed closely behind the other party and followed him up a tall tree. His movements were extremely fast and coquettish. He chased after the baboon from tree to tree, making it cry out in panic. The photographers were stunned. Amazing. Yolashanda was also stunned. It was so cool. He shouted from below, "Catch one. Bite him, bite him. Scar hasn't eaten breakfast yet." Scar, who had yet to recover from his injuries and was being bullied today, cried out, "Ow, ow." Hearing the little cutie's request, A.O. Daisai chased even more vigorously. His and the baboon's weight eventually broke a tree branch, but this did not affect his performance. In the process of falling, the leopard finally bit the baboon. Then he flipped his body in the air and landed on all fours. Yolashanda immediately rushed up and helped his boyfriend bite the prey to death. The brave Scar also ran up. In the end, the two leopards gave the baboon to him for breakfast. He was overjoyed. As if taking revenge, Scar bit the baboon's flesh and shook his head crazily. After successfully rescuing Scar and even getting him some breakfast, Alisanda had completed his mission and quickly restored his image as a cripple. He limped out of the forest with a chivalrous look on his face. Photographer, good leopards. Facing the baboon, the leopards and hyenas, who were especially ferocious, quickly returned to their usual lazy appearance after the battle ended. Feeling tired, they found a spot beside the camera and lay down. The photographers were flattered again. Could it be that the encounter in the carriage in the morning was not a coincidence? Did these two leopards like them? The blissful Scar finished his breakfast alone and quickly went to see where his leopard brothers were. Humans still scared him, but they would no longer disappear with a whoosh like before. At most, he would wander around and slowly approach. Through careful observation, the photographer finally understood that this hyena was not scary. In fact, the real one was a little shy and introverted. The photographer took many photos of this hyena, who lived with the leopards, and reported his story back. An injured hyena who would be well taken care of by the leopards seemed to have a surprisingly good life. In the next few days, Yolashanda and the rest stayed with the photographers and were not stingy with showing their daily lives. In their small group, A.O. Daisai was the vanguard of the hunt. He was outstanding in all aspects and was their leader. Yolashanda and Scar were more lively and playful. They usually played the role of obedient followers. They were like a big brother with two underlings. The photographers did not dare to approach the dignified A.O. Daisai, but they quickly built a friendship with Yolashanda and Scar. This friendship made the grassland life of the two field workers a little more warm and less fearful. They finally dared to cook instant noodles and eat outside the carriage. They even wanted to try camping. Think about it. Two leopards and a hyena as companions would give people a damn sense of security. However, they still did not dare to try it at the moment. Perhaps there would be a chance in the future. The human truck stayed on the grassland for a while before returning to human society to replenish supplies. 4 months after the introduction, Yelashanda and the others in the grassland were notified that they were finally leaving the grasslands. At this time, it was the dry season and the weather was hot. The African savanna was yellow, and the animals endured the heat and struggled to make a living on the grass. Yelashanda, who was already hungry, did not tell Ao Daisai that it was time for them to hunt as usual. And Ao Daisai seemed to know what he was thinking, so he calmly looked at the grassland that he was about to bid farewell to, and did nothing. Ao Daisai, who had experienced all these with him, leaned his head over a little and pressed it against his cute face. Indeed, there were too many memories of them here, and it was hard to forget. The new member, Scar, did not know anything, but he was so sensitive. He held his teething club in his mouth and let Yelashanda and Ao Daisai play with it. Perhaps this was the best consolation that Scar could think of, and it was also the only thing he had. All right, let's stop being sad here. They were about to welcome a new life, and this was a great thing. But when the staff was still worrying about how to lure them into the cage, they realized that they were very proactive and entered in a single file. Yelashanda and Ao Daisai knew that they were about to return to the motherland because they were smart. So shouldn't they be more proactive? Scar was completely following the trend. He went wherever the leopard went. After being locked up, he was stunned. His mouth was stuck on the railing, and he wanted to go out. Especially when he got into the carriage, which was dark and cramped inside. Scar was even more afraid and anxiously walked in circles in the cage. It was only when Yelashanda pressed him down with her claws and patiently comforted him that he became obedient. What's the hurry? We're going to enjoy ourselves. Do you know that? Scar did not know. Moreover, he was hungry. He had not eaten dinner yet. Fortunately, the staff had already considered this problem. After 3 hours of bumpy land transportation, they fed beef to 3 wild animals at the airport. The food was so good. Yelashanda had not eaten beef after becoming a leopard. No matter how powerful he and Ao Daisai were, it was impossible for them to hunt wild cows. That would be too ostentatious. After eating beef that he had not eaten for a long time, he was so happy that he kept snoring. Scar, who had not seen the world, had never eaten beef before. This meal made him overjoyed. Later, when everyone was full, he was still gnawing on the bones. Look at you. Yelashanda was especially good at talking. She did not care if Scar hurt her or not, and even snatched Scar's bones away. Oh my, it's fine if you're 70 to 80% full. We're taking a plane later. Aren't you airsick? Are you that full? What if you vomit? Not only will you feel uncomfortable, but you'll also feel disgusted. Scar did not dare to resist. Sometimes he would pout coquettishly at the teeth-grinding stick without warning. Yelashanda could not bear to watch. He and Ao Daisai were not even like this when they were in love. The author has something to say. Everyone is in a sweet relationship. Chapter 317. As Scar and the 2 leopards were living companions, Scar, who was admired by the female hyenas, didn't seem to be willing to stay with the hyenas for a long time. Although they were in a relationship, Scar was still more willing to be with the 2 leopards in his daily life. He was used to it. Staff, your friendship has touched the heavens and touched the earth. Even love couldn't shake Scar's determination to be with the leopards. They were truly brothers. Yelashanda, Scar, what's wrong with you? Isn't it good to have a wife and children? What's so good about staying with 2 male leopards? It wasn't hard to understand. Scar had been rescued by them at a young age. It hadn't been easy for him to grow up. It was impossible for him to be seduced by a girl in a few days. Scar, who had experienced many hardships, needed a sense of security too much. Only 2 leopards could give him a sense of security. The staff had a headache. It's difficult to allocate living areas like this. The 3 wild animals from Africa had safely passed the adaptation period. Now, they had to be allocated a larger living area. The unit's original plan was for the leopards to stay with the other leopards. If possible, The hyenas would stay with the hyenas and have more offspring. This was the healthy and positive direction of development. Now that they were unwilling to separate, what if the other leopards attacked the hyenas? The staff felt that this was a problem, but Yolashanda and A.O. Daisai didn't think it was a problem. Touch Scar? Who would dare? They were just leopards raised by humans. Would Scar be afraid of them? The staff asked the photographer for his opinion and understood the details of this small group. The photographer felt that the unit shouldn't worry that the leopards would bully the hyenas. Yes, the hyenas were very ferocious. What a group fight! A small group fight with the natives? The staff, all right, since the hyenas didn't want to live in the hyenas' territory, they could let them try to get along for the time being. Once something happened, they would stop it immediately, as they were fed all year round. The animals here had their own breeders who were familiar with them. The breeders could enter and leave their living areas at will. However, it was still very risky. The first step to meeting a new friend was to familiarize themselves with each other's scent through the fence. The natives of the reserve loved to watch the fun. They were lured to the fence by the breeders with food. As they ate, they looked curiously at the other side. The eyes of the Aborigines were simple and naive, unlike the ferocious and sharp leopards in the wild. After all, they had never personally killed any animals in their lives. To put it bluntly, he didn't have any killing intent and was still a child who hadn't grown up yet. Unlike Yolashanda and A.O. Daisai, they had a wild aura that made people fear them. Even though they knew that they would not hurt people, they still often felt a chill run down their spines. To be able to raise themselves so well in the wild, their fangs must have bitten many animals to death. Therefore, when they appeared, the natives next door were very vigilant and fearful, as if they couldn't relax at all. Some of them even left with food in their mouths. Fortunately, the two leopards were obviously not interested in the natives. Only Scar paid more attention to them. His erect ears conveyed a slightly vigilant signal, because he had always been in charge of this work. However, he was soon left with only doubts because the leopards here were not as intimidating as the leopards on the grassland. On the other hand, it was the other party's fearful look that made Scar confused. Stop looking. They can't threaten you. Hurry up and eat. Yolashanda found it funny and hurriedly pulled Scar's paw. He wanted Scar to quickly understand that this was not the African grassland. There was no need to be desperados here. They could be simpler. The situation between the natives and the new members was clear at a glance. The staff could also clearly see that the natives were more afraid of the little friends from Africa. If they really lived together, it was unknown who would bully who. The strong always had their own halo and attraction. The leopards, who were afraid of Yolashanda and the others, secretly observed them when they were full and had nothing to do. They were quite cute. The small African group was not stingy with their tree climbing skills, jumping on the spot, and catching things in the air. It was too showy. The natives and the keepers of the natives had complicated feelings. As expected of the natives who came back from the wild, they were amazing. However, it was fine if leopards could climb trees, but why could hyenas, who were born with poor conditions, also jump and kick up trees? Oh, he even knew how to use his neck to climb. Who taught him? The natives. Secretly observe and secretly imitate. However, it seemed to be useless. Most of the skills needed to be learned from a young age. If the leopards did not take the lead from the beginning, the whole group would gradually not know anything. This group of naive and cute leopards who did not know anything basically had no vigilance. After a few days, they found that the new members were not a threat and wanted to play together. The staff, happy to see this. But it was not so fast. To be on the safe side, the familiarization period was extended. The leopards' living area was about 5 square kilometers, neither too big nor too small. There were several leopard viewing platforms, such as cable cars, glass bridges, and so on. Tourists could bring their cameras to the leopard viewing spots and wait for the leopards to appear, or they could come and watch when the keepers were feeding. At present, there were more tourists near the lions and tigers, and it was more valuable. Many people who went to see the lions and tigers did not want to go to the leopards area, unless they really love the leopards. Many tourists said that it would be great if they could see the lions, tigers, and leopards at the same time. Unfortunately, leopards, lions, and tigers were not of the same weight. It was easy for accidents to happen when they lived together. On the day of the change of living area, 3 African visitors swaggered into the leopard's territory. The natives did not dare to go near them at all. Ao Daisai led 2 of his companions to patrol the new territory. Although it was only 5 square kilometers, it actually took a long time to walk around. The territory had become more spacious. Scar looked very happy. He could not wait to mark the stones and tree trunks that he saw. Yulashanda looked sideways and only wanted to say, "Brother Scar, you are so strong." There were also some small animals living on the mountaintop, such as squirrels, rabbits, and pheasants. The leopards that were fed by people would not hunt them. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai did not know how to hunt, but Scar was different. After arriving at the new territory, Scar excitedly chased after the rabbits. What a sin! However, they did not have the face to say that Scar was a different kind of leopard that did not even let go of fish. At night, they also went to the water to catch fish to eat. It was said that leopards on the African grassland also knew how to catch fish. After all, leopards were not picky about food. Scar did not eat fish because he did not know how to spit out the bones. The hard-working Scar held a fat rabbit in his mouth and wanted to bring it back for his companions to eat. On the way back, he was attacked by an indigenous leopard. He was so angry that he put down the rabbit and fought with the leopard. This fight attracted Yulashanda and the rest, as well as a group of natives to watch. Looking at it, there was no intention of fighting one-on-one. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai did not care. However, they would not allow the leopard to think about Scar's rabbit. Yulashanda quickly picked up the rabbit and climbed up the tree with a whoosh. Natives, hey, middle finger. The ferocious Scar beat up the leopard and made it run away quickly. He did not want to fight with him at all. As the saying goes, don't chase a cornered enemy. However, what Scar liked to do the most was to be relentless. Whoever bullied him, he would fight back to the end. This unlucky leopard was chased by Scar for 3 days and 3 nights, causing the staff to be alarmed. After checking the surveillance footage to understand what happened, it turned out that it was a murder caused by a rabbit. Wasn't this hyena too vengeful? The cameraman who was familiar with them. No, the 2 leopards were even more ferocious. The hyena was Yes, they marked their territory as soon as they came in, causing the other leopards to not dare to move freely. This kind of living atmosphere was unhealthy. Yulashanda felt that he was very innocent. Wasn't marking the territory an animal's nature? However, they were still sent back to the leopard garden and returned to the small garden where they used to live. Damn it! Yulashanda looked at the ignorant Scar. Are you satisfied? Fighting and causing trouble, peeing and marking the territory. It was all Scar's doing. It had nothing to do with them. Scar, ? Why did they return to the small garden to live? This place was too small. He did not like it. Ao Daisai, who did not like a big mountain? This was too innocent. It was all Scar's fault. He jumped onto a high branch and looked at the lion and tiger's mountain with some yearning. The environment here was bigger and better. If they moved again, Ao Daisai did not want to go to the leopard garden. He wanted to go here. Since Scar was so arrogant, let him show off his power with the lion and tiger. The staff's thoughts coincided with Ao Daisai's. They deeply felt Scar's ferocity. The leopards could not control Scar at all. The hyenas here probably cannot either. They could only put them in the lion and tiger's living area. After making the decision, the zookeeper used the same trick again. He used food to lure the lion and tiger to the fence and let them face each other first. He focused on observing the hyena's reaction. Good fellow, the hyenas that had chased the leopard for 3 days and 3 nights were not afraid of the lion and tiger at all. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai. Scar, I can't tell. To be honest, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. If the tigers and lions swarmed them, they were not sure if they could handle it. They did not know where Scar's confidence came from. Ao Daisai was quite confident. He could tell that these lions and tigers had no fighting experience. He and Yulashanda could take them down one by one. The native lions and tigers were not as afraid of Yolashanda and the rest as the native leopards. They even had some interest in attacking. It was not hunting. It was just fun. The two leopards were also lying by the fence and looking at them with interest. Fun, right? Staff. They seemed to be very interested in each other. The way the animals integrated this time could not be replicated. People were afraid that the lions and tigers would attack the leopards together, so they first chose a lion and a tiger to try to communicate. This lion and tiger were more docile. Their arrival was treated politely by Yolashanda's small group. Of course, if they did not treat them politely, how could they snatch the territory? Facing the lion and tiger, the arrogant Scar would be much more restrained. Even if the lion roared at him, he would not dare to make a sound. Therefore, both sides got along very well. After another month of adaptation, they were about to go crazy in the small garden. The staff finally decided to let the small group officially enter the lion and tiger's living area. After experiencing the experience of being repatriated, they were especially low-key this time. Ao, Daisai, pay attention to Scar. As soon as he finished speaking, they looked at Scar and realized that he was hiding behind Yolashanda with his tail between his legs. Very good. Without Scar, this sh*t stir, they should be able to live in peace this time. The author has something to say. One more chapter, and the leopard chapter will end. The next chapter will be a sheep chapter. Chapter 3:18. It was an extremely tense moment for the animals to officially live together. Countless pairs of worried eyes stared at the entrance, and several strong breeders stood around, ready to stop the fight at any time. Yes, they were serious about stopping the fight for the lions and leopards. Hearing the unusual movement, the lions and tigers all came out to look at the three members who were neither new nor old. Their focused eyes had a hint of covetousness. The pampered and carefree cats of the indigenous people were either standing, sitting, watching with their mouths open stupidly, or bending down in a hunting posture. If humans were stared at like this, they would definitely shudder and feel their scalp tingle. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai, who walked past them, just casually glanced at them. They were neither interested nor afraid. They had already passed that stage. At the moment, these big cats were as cute as kittens. Even Scar was only scared for 2 seconds. Once he got used to this atmosphere, he slowly relaxed his nerves. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a pair of very beautiful leopards walked past them gracefully and went deep into the vast reserve. Suddenly, the tiger closest to them jumped up and pounced straight at Ao Daisai, who was the most threatening. The harmonious scene was broken, and everyone's hearts were in their throats. Ao Daisai's eyes flashed with a trace of helplessness. Before the tiger moved, he had already predicted that the other party would move. At this time, he only needed to dodge easily to avoid the stupid tiger's attack that he thought was ferocious. The other party's attack didn't work, and it even wagged its tail. It was a little angry, but also a little confused. This Yolashanda was stunned by his actions. You want to know if his big brother had no ability to predict before he pounced on them. If that was the case, he was a little worried that he would become a noob after living here for a long time. With the lead of the first tiger, the other big cats suddenly seemed to have taken stimulants and pounced on them one after another. Dama! Yolashanda screamed in his heart. Don't come over, we want to keep a low profile. It wasn't that they didn't dare to fight with the natives, but they didn't want to cause trouble. The small African group nimbly dodged the attacks one by one. They did not let these big cats touch even a single strand of their hair. This was very easy for them. Scar was pounced on by the lion and tiger several times, but he found that he was unscathed. From his eyes, it was enough to guess the change in his heart. I've become stronger again? Stronger my ass. It's just that the environment has become better. Yolashanda patted Scar's paw, telling him to stop fighting and quickly catch up with Ao Daisai. However, their retreat did not make the lions and tigers leave. It was as if they had seen a fun toy chasing after Yolashanda and the rest. This was not the way to go. Little Bear, take Scar and leave first. I'll take down one of them. A.O. Daisai turned around and stared at the leading tiger with its sharp eyes. Yulashanda immediately said, "No, if you want to fight, then fight together. We're not leaving." It was impossible to leave A.O. Daisai alone. If these big cats swarmed up, even if they played, A.O. Daisai would be killed. Besides, they couldn't take it down. If they did, they would have to live in the small garden again. A.O. Daisai suddenly shook its tail, as if it was very dissatisfied with not being able to fight seriously. While they were thinking, the group of lions and tigers had already caught up with them. At the same time, there were also the frightened keepers. It was over. These lions and tigers really knew how to bully leopards and hyenas. They had stopped them quickly, but they couldn't stop them now. When the leopards stopped running, the two sides quickly met up and started fighting. Hearing the sound, Scar suddenly turned around and found that his leopard companions had been stopped. This scene seemed to ignite a raging fire in his eyes. Roar! Deep in his heart, Scar was naturally afraid of lions and tigers, but he also had times when he was brave. Every time Scar went crazy, it was because Yulashanda and A.O. Daisai were bullied. He would turn into a crazy Scar in a second. Scar, who had already walked far away, ran back without hesitation and joined the battle ferociously. The keepers were still worried about the leopards and hyenas a second ago, but the next second, they started to worry about the lions and tigers because they saw that the lions and tigers were stunned and were no match for the leopards and hyenas at all. This was natural. It had to be said that A.O. Daisai was very unhappy with this fight. There were a few times when his fangs were about to reach his opponent's neck, but he suddenly remembered that he could not see blood. He could only scratch with his claws. Yulashanda was the same, but he had a lot of tricks. If he could not bite his opponent's neck, he would bite his opponent's tail and pull it out. The two leopards were merciful, but Scar was not particular. Once he bit, he really bit. Whoever attacked him, he would bite them to death. The helpless keepers standing at the side were stunned. The hyenas are so ferocious. I'll pull them away. Fortunately, the lions and tigers were not stupid. Realizing that their opponents were too ferocious, they walked away timidly. Scar, who had never been afraid of fighting, did not seem to have the intention of ending the battle. He still bared his teeth and growled, revealing his terrifying white teeth as he chased after his opponent. Seeing this, Yulashanda hurriedly went in front of Scar to stop him from chasing. Just like that, the storm calmed down. No more lions or tigers dared to chase after them. "Let's go." A.O. Daisai called them over and turned to leave, as if he could not wait to patrol the territory. After watching the three of them leave, the keepers heaved a long sigh of relief in unison. Oh my God! For words appeared in their minds, inviting a wolf into the house. This protected area was much larger. It was a full 20 square kilometers. The area they used to frequent in Africa was about the same. The environment here was more comfortable and rich. There were even some animals like deer. As the ferocious beasts were fed by humans and never lacked food and drink, they rarely hunted by themselves. When A.O. Daisai saw the fat prey, he could not help but lick his fangs. However, he only looked and did not plan to chase after them. The meat provided by humans had been processed and was more palatable. If there was no need, he did not want the number of animals in his territory to decrease. In addition, Yulashanda liked animals. In the future, he would be happier with these animals. Scar wanted to hunt, but he could not do it alone. He chased the prey away a few times, but the leopard brothers ignored him. With AC numbers, he basically understood. Anyway, they would not be hungry. When it was time to eat, the keepers would go to a special place to feed them. They could just go over and eat. The places where the keepers fed were usually near the sightseeing spots to make it easier for tourists to take pictures of the big cats. When the three of them were still in Africa, they gained a large number of fans in China through their daily videos. When people heard that they were open for business, a large number of tourists came to see them. Today, the place where they ate was near the glass bridge. When the three of them heard the whistle of the keeper, they leisurely rushed over. Although the big cats didn't bite people, it was still quite dangerous to feed them with meat. Therefore, The breeder threw the pieces of meat down from the top of a special feeding cart from the top of the cart. The whistle had already attracted several hungry big cats. They whined and wandered around the cart, ready to fight for food. This powerful sound made the tourists worried that the leopards would be hungry. The leopards, who had no advantage in size, looked like it would be difficult to get food. They might even be beaten up later. However, their worries were superfluous. These small, furry leopards swaggered over, as if they were not afraid of the lions and tigers next to them at all. The keeper threw the first huge steak from the cart. The first one to jump up and catch it was a leopard. He held the steak in his mouth and instantly jumped up the tree next door. Then the second piece was thrown, and the first one to catch, it was another leopard. The crowd on the bridge let out a surprise cheer. After all, this result was too unexpected. It was simply a Waterloo for the lion and tiger fans. What was even more outrageous was that this leopard came down after holding the steak up the tree. He was Yelashanda. Not only did he snatch the steak for himself, but he also enthusiastically snatched it for Scar. Scar seemed to know that Yelashanda was snatching the food for him. He was very dedicated to guarding Yelashanda, not allowing the big cats around him to come close. Whoever came close, he would show his teeth to scare them. Under his protection, Yelashanda successfully snatched the steak again. The two brothers happily went up the tree to eat together. While they were doing these things, Ao Daisai looked down from above, watching every movement of the whole scene. He was like a sniper hiding in the dark, making people feel safe. Under his two paws were two pieces of steak. That was his and Yelashanda's lunch. After a while, Yelashanda came up. He found a suitable place to lie down, tilted his head, and started to eat the meat. Yelashanda's cute and active appearance made Ao Daisai very happy. Ao Daisai stuck his head out and licked the other party's ears before starting to eat. Although he bullied the indigenous big cats, Yelashanda did not feel bad at all. He felt that the arrival of himself, Ao Daisai, and Scar had a positive effect. He sometimes heard the keepers say that ever since the three of them moved in, the animals in the entire sanctuary became energetic. Because Scar caused the most trouble, the one who was criticized was always Scar. On the other hand, he and Ao Daisai had a very good reputation here. So good that people wanted to keep their children. After hearing the keeper's scary plan, Yelashanda hurriedly found a place with surveillance cameras. He planned to get intimate with Ao Daisai and prove that he was gay. The tool leopard, Ao Daisai, was brought to an unfamiliar place by Yelashanda. Well, they usually did not stay in places with surveillance cameras. What were they doing? Ao Daisai looked at Yelashanda. As usual, after looking at each other for more than 3 seconds, he started to lick his cheeks. Yelashanda pushed the boat with the current and pressed the other party down here. Once he started, he did not need to worry about what would happen next. Ao Daisai would happily take over. After being intimate, he was pushed away by Yelashanda because the other party wanted to take a shower to cool down. The sweet hug made Ao Daisai forget about the heat. After the little bear left, he followed and dived to the bottom of the water to get close to his cute partner. The satisfied him still did not know that he had been tricked. But even if he knew, he would have done it, because Ao Daisai was never stingy with letting others know that he liked Yelashanda. The author has something to say. I said yesterday that I wanted to write about sheep. Actually, sheep only has a small lamb kebab scene. The other plots are not full, haha. Let's think about what to write tomorrow. As for humans, I will consider the last unit because they have human characters. It's very cute. Chapter 319. Some animals were the lost treasures of this world, and people would never be able to see them again. For example, the white wolves that lived in Newfoundland before 1911 were affectionately called the dream wolves. However, they were killed off in a cruel massacre. In the 19th century, the Beothuk people lived in the land of Newfoundland. They relied on fishing for a living and lived a poor but optimistic life. However, one day, a fleet armed with guns and cannons descended from the sky and occupied the land. They first persecuted the Beothuk people, then killed all the white wolves on the island. In later generations, no one mentioned this period of history. Even Yelashanda, who loved all kinds of animals, was not very clear about it. Therefore, when he found out that he had turned into a handsome white wolf, he was very excited. Ao Daisai used a cheating device that allowed him to communicate with Yelashanda from a long distance and quickly came to his partner's side. He was anxious to find Yelashanda and did not know what kind of animal he was. Therefore, when he saw the cute and handsome white wolf, Ao Daisai was also intoxicated. He quickly pressed the fluffy little bear down on the snow and started to be affectionate with him. After regaining their healthy and energetic bodies, they were like huskies that had been locked up for a month. They ran around and were very happy. Soon, the snow was covered with their messy footprints. That's right, it was winter now. Therefore, Yelashanda's face was furry and his pair of round eyes were shining brightly because of happiness. Ao Daisai was also furry. The fur on his body was the same as Yelashanda's, almost pure white. He rolled around in the snow with satisfaction and got used to his new life. From time to time, he would hug Yelashanda and bring Yelashanda into his arms. Most of the time, they did not need to talk to each other. If not for Yelashanda being a chatterbox and occasionally needing Ao Daisai to chat with him, Ao Daisai could have stayed silent for the whole day. He only needed to take care of his partner, Yelashanda, through his daily actions. The two young and strong white wolves rolled around for a while before finally stopping in satisfaction. They raised their heads and licked each other's faces and foreheads. "Are you hungry?" Ao Daisai asked gently. As long as he saw the energetic Yelashanda, he would feel very happy. "It's all right. Let's not talk about it for now." Yelashanda had a very strong sense of danger. He looked up at his surroundings and stood up to shake off the snow on his body. "I think we should figure out the details of this new environment first. For example, what kind of place this is, what natural enemies there are, and whether we need to worry about poachers." "Yes." Ao Daisai stood up and looked in the direction of the sun. Then he observed the surrounding plants. "The climate here is a bit like an island. Let's go and find the highest point to take a look." "All right." Yelashanda nodded, and the two wolves started to climb from the middle of the mountain. As they were still young, their movements were as agile as when they were at their peak. Soon, they had climbed to the highest point of the island. That was not all. Finally, they climbed up a big tree. From there, they could immediately see the coastline in the distance. As an experienced geographer who often sailed, he immediately guessed the name of this island. However, why were there no modern buildings by the sea? What about the cities and tall towers? There were no such things. There were only a few simple villages on the island, which looked as strange as a primitive tribe. If this was really Newfoundland, which they had visited during their voyage, it should not be so desolate and primitive. Yelashanda thought for a while and felt that he had found the answer. He guessed, is it possible that this is not the 21st century? Just like many times before, they had woken up in reverse time. Ao Daisai, who was beside Yelashanda, licked his fangs. His amber eyes looked absent-minded because he was hungry. "Let's find something to eat first, then go to the fishing village to take a look." What era they were in now was quite important to them. It was related to what protection they needed to live in here. Yelashanda followed his boyfriend and jumped down. The thick snow on the ground allowed them to do whatever they wanted. However, this terrible weather also meant that it was more difficult to find food. With their sensitive noses, they first smelled the scent of other white wolves. Perhaps this was the wolf pack that they used to live in. However, they did not plan to go back now. The lifestyle of the Newfoundland white wolves was very typical. They lived in packs and in pairs, which could effectively reduce the risk of survival. People often said that wolves were faithful believers in love. The Newfoundland white wolves were one of them. So far, they had lived a carefree life on this island, and there were quite a few of them. Although Yelashanda and Ao Daisai deliberately avoided other white wolves, they inevitably met face to face when looking for prey. What was more pleasant was that both parties did not have any conflicts. They were just stunned for a moment and then went their own ways. It was inexplicably cute. White wolves were nocturnal animals. During the day, they came out in packs to look for food. It was probably because food was scarce in winter, so they could only travel day and night. As animals with a keen sense of smell, they followed the scent and finally found the same pack of deer. It was quite awkward. Yolashanda swore that he did not take advantage of the pack of wolves. They also came over because they smelled the scent. Don't think so much. We'll hunt by ourselves. Ao Daisai was not affected. The hunting of wolves was different from that of lions and tigers. They did not rely on sneak attacks. Instead, they relied on their amazing endurance and teamwork. They rushed up first and tired the pack of prey. In the end, the pack of wolves took advantage of them. That's right. Seeing the two unfamiliar white wolves rushing towards their prey, the pack of wolves who stayed behind also followed. Compared to the heavy bodies of the prey, their footsteps were lighter and their bodies were more agile. Ao Daisai and Yolashanda both caught up with a deer at the same time. They did not hesitate to pounce on their nearest prey. Two prey were about to be in their hands. If they did not mind eating frozen meat, these two would be enough for several meals. Yolashanda thought with joy. In the blink of an eye, before he could completely delay the movements of the prey, he realized that a few white wolves had also pounced on him. This action made him instantly dumbfounded. "Brother, this seems to be my prey. What's the use of you coming to help?" He was very determined. Even if the other party helped to kill the prey, the rights to the prey would still belong to him. However, seeing more and more white wolves pouncing on him, Yolashanda was not confident anymore. "Boo-hoo, it's obviously mine. Ao Daisai, they're bullying me. I didn't ask for their help." The situation gradually got out of control. Yolashanda began to look for Ao Daisai to support him, hoping that his boyfriend would give him some confidence to monopolize the prey. Ao Daisai glanced at him. "Come over. There were too many white wolves over there." Even if the prey was dead, it was impossible for Yolashanda to monopolize it. These wolves were so hungry that their stomachs were rumbling. In front of food, they would never talk about first come, first serve. Oh, Yolashanda immediately relented. He did not want to make a wedding dress for others. He quickly ran to Ao Daisai's side and bit a prey to death with Ao Daisai. They were afraid that other wolves would come forward and snatch the prey away. Without hesitation, they immediately dragged the prey to the tree and enjoyed it. One prey was not enough for the wolf pack. After dividing up the available food, the pack of wolves continued to chase the herd of deer. Food would replenish their energy. In such a poor winter, they had to hunt day and night to fill their stomachs. The white wolves only weighed a little more than 100 kilograms. One deer was enough for two white wolves to eat their fill. They wanted to go down the mountain to explore the situation. They were not sure if they would return to the starting point. Hence, they put the leftover prey on the ground for other carnivores to help themselves. From the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain, it did not seem too far away. It was not until late at night that they finally got close to the village. From afar, they could see the light of a fire. It was the light of a bonfire. Under the cover of the night, two white wolves who did not know the situation quietly approached. They smelled the fishy smell and the unique smell of humans. Yolashanda sneezed and muttered, "This group of people smells so strong. Don't they usually shower? Wasn't that right?" The Aborigines of the island in the 19th century did not have such modern living facilities. Not to mention the cold winter. Even in summer, they did not wash themselves clean every day. When they reached a place where they could see the situation of the village clearly, they stopped walking forward. Instead, they both lay down and observed carefully. Yolashanda was shocked by what he saw. He saw primitive thatched huts. In front of each house, there was a bamboo rack for drying clothes. There were also tents made of animal skin. There were also strings of dried fish hanging on bamboo poles. This was really like a primitive tribe. Then they saw people wearing animal skin and warming themselves by the fire. These primitive people made them certain that it was really not the 21st century. To confirm this guess, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai left the village and went to the beach. There was no marine garbage at the beach now. The water was very clear. It was completely different from their impression of the sea. What era was it now? Yolashanda was slightly curious. A.O. Daisai did not seem to think so much. He found a fisherman's net in a bay. There were lively fish in it. "Little bear, do you want to eat fish?" A.O. Daisai asked Yolashanda happily. Yolashanda was happy, but he paused. "No, we can't violate the fruits of the people's labor. If you want to eat fish, catch it yourself." They had principles in their hearts. They could only lie on the reef and wait. When they found that fish were attracted by the fish food in the net, they bit the fish before it entered the net. This way, it would not be considered as violating the fruits of the people's labor. The same species of fish that grew in different water quality would taste different degrees of delicious. Yolashanda had never thought that this kind of marine fish was so delicious. Oh my God, wasn't the polar bear very happy now? They ate fish until they were full, and then returned to the forest before dawn. The Beatok wearing animal skin came to collect the net the next morning. He found some suspicious marks on the reef, as if someone had killed the fish here. He checked the fish in the net. There was no difference from usual, so he did not think much of it. The Beatok people relied on fishing for a living. Occasionally, they would go up the mountain to hunt deer. They did not have any conflicts with white wolves. After all, ordinary white wolves did not eat fish and would not attack humans in the village. So they lived in peace. As for the animal skin they wore, most of it was very warm seal skin. This was something that animals on land could not compare to. The author had something to say. The Newfoundland white wolf was a very beautiful and intelligent wolf, but their history was too cruel. It was as tragic as the Beatok people. Chapter 3:20. Once it snowed, the surface of the sea would be frozen, and it was no longer suitable for fishing. The villagers usually dug holes in the ice to catch fish or ate the food stored in the autumn. Yolashanda and A.O. Daisai usually wandered around the village, and they quickly found out where the villagers stored their food. It was simple and crude. They skewered the fish, and after some simple processing, they piled them in the snow. When they needed a cart, they would bring a small bucket over to take it and boil it into a milky white soup, which was quite nutritious. There were seals, beluga whales, and so on among the food. They did not know what tools the fishermen used to catch them. There seems to be seals. Smelling the familiar smell, Yolashanda could not help but salivate. He and A.O. Daisai had not eaten seals for a long time. A very, very long time. This smell seemed to bring back memories of the past. How nostalgic it was. A.O. Daisai thought for a while, then rubbed Yolashanda with mischievous eyes and said, "That is the fruit of the people's labor. If you want to eat it, we can catch it ourselves." Of course, I did not say that I want to steal it. Yolashanda quickly said, "Really, how could A.O. Daisai think that he had the idea of stealing the fish? If the fishermen knew that there were white wolves stealing the fish, the relationship between humans and wolves would be bad. Yolashanda would not be such a troublemaker. It was very difficult to catch seals with a weight of more than 50 kilograms. This was because they were not like the fishermen who could carry tools and work together as a team. Fortunately, Yolashanda and A.O. Daisai were not easy to deal with. They fully understood the habits of seals. These were like instincts engraved in their blood and bones, and they would never forget it. The two white wolves walked side by side on the snow, heading in the direction where they might catch seals. The weather was good today. The sun was bright after the snow, and the seals would climb up to rest through the breathing holes. The Beatok people, who were pulling a cart of tools with sleds, also walked slowly on the snow in a line. They seemed so small but so active. The Alaskan Malamutes raised by the Beatoks were steady and well-behaved. The family was diligent and loyal, helping their masters to pull things and explore the way. Most of the seal tracks were found by these Alaskans, as if they were different animals from the Alaskans who liked to tear down houses in the city. As they walked, they saw two handsome white wolves in the vast expanse of snow. The Alaskan Malamutes informed their masters. Their masters just looked at them and went on. Everything was very quiet. Even the dogs' footsteps had a sense of caution. This was because they were used to making too much noise and startling their prey. Hunting seals was a long process. Sometimes They might need to wait and observe for a few hours. However, they were very smart and guessed that the two white wolves might leave after eating. They could only say that they were very lucky to have met Yelashanda and Ao Daisai. If it were other white wolves, they might have guarded the remaining food and not let it go. It was too difficult to find food now. Seeing that the other party had left, the white wolves who had picked up the leftovers rushed forward excitedly. They even made ooh, ooh, ooh sounds as if they were calling their companions over to eat. Ooh! Not long after, their companions' long and mysterious responses came from the distance. This method of communication was very cool. The life of a big wolf family was really lively. Yelashanda watched with great interest and was reluctant to leave immediately. So they hid nearby and watched. Soon they saw a few strong white wolves bringing the old, young, sick, and disabled over to eat. Ooh, I really like their family atmosphere. Even if their companions are injured or old, they will not be abandoned. Similarly, wolf cubs who had lost their parents would be well taken care of. Everyone said that wolves were sinister and cunning, but they were really good to their companions. After listening to Yelashanda's popular knowledge about wolves, Ao Daisai also felt that wolves were very good. He liked this kind of animal. Of course, he did not dislike other animals. No matter what kind of animal was born in this world, it was only to survive. After satisfying their craving for the seal, Yelashanda and the rest were now going back to the mountains. They walked faster than the villagers. When they returned, they found that the villagers had thrown some meat on the snow. When night fell, the hungry white wolves that were wandering around took these pieces of meat. Perhaps this was a meal that they had not eaten in a long time. After eating, they would have more energy to look for their next meal. Beatak was a good person. He was actually willing to share a portion of the meat with the white wolves while he was harvesting. Perhaps this was the reason why the white wolves did not attack the village. It's so quiet and peaceful here. Yelashanda smiled from the bottom of his heart. He looked at the rising smoke in the village and really wanted to taste the seal soup cooked at home. Smash it, smash it. Let's go back and find a place to rest. Ao Daisai also liked this place. He brought Yelashanda back to the foot of the mountain and found a place to spend the night. The thick fur on their bodies did not make them feel cold, but it was comfortable to hug each other to sleep in the winter. Ao Daisai loved Yelashanda's furry touch very much and always liked to hug him in his arms. The two wolf faces squeezed together and licked each other. As they licked each other, it often became a different scene. For example, Ao Daisai pressed down on Yelashanda and covered him tightly. He also liked to bite the back of his neck and fiercely warn him to be obedient. Yelashanda blinked innocently. How was he not obedient? Wasn't he just obediently curled up in his boyfriend's arms? Well, later on, Yelashanda understood that this was a form of sexual interest. Okay, next time he would remember to be more wild and make Ao Daisai unable to stop. In the quiet winter night, there were occasional cries of children in the fishing village, but they were quickly comforted by their parents patiently. This kind of scene always made people feel warm. As time passed, the stars and the moon gradually disappeared from the sky, and the beautiful dawn arrived as scheduled. Ordinary wolves were nocturnal, and now it was time for them to sleep. The elk on the mountain had just woken up and should be looking for food now. The weather on the island had been sunny for a few days, and the sea was very calm. Ao Daisai smelled an unusual signal. He stared at the calm coastline and felt that there was something wrong with the airflow. Even the knowledgeable Yelashanda felt that something was wrong. The airflow on the island had changed, and this was very likely a sign of the coming of a snowstorm. In order to find out the truth, they climbed up to a high place to observe again. They only felt that the wind blowing over had indeed changed direction, which was particularly unusual in this season. They were very worried about the Beatak people in the village. Little did they know that the Beatak people also had their own way of judging sudden changes in the weather. Remember the fish nets they put in the sea every day? If a snowstorm was coming, the fish in the water would be the first to sense it. They would scramble to swim to the deep sea and no longer approach the shore. When the Beatak man pulled in the net in the morning, he saw that there was not a single fish, and his face suddenly changed. He hurried back to the village and reported to everyone that the weather was about to change. The whole village immediately took precautions against the storm. Seeing this busy scene, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai finally breathed a sigh of relief. The Beatok people's precaution against the snowstorm was to reinforce the ice houses to avoid the risk. When the time came, the whole family would live in the ice houses. The Alaskans they fed were not allowed to be brought into the ice houses, so they could only be left outside for them to protect themselves. The snowstorm may uproot tents and thatched houses, depending on the size of the snowstorm. The Beatok people left enough food for the dogs. If the houses were really blown down, they hoped that the dogs could hide in the mountains and take care of themselves. 2 days later, the snowstorm really came. At this time, whether it was humans or animals in the mountains, everyone was in danger. The strong wind soon blew down the houses in the village, and the dogs, who had lost their shelter, ran into the mountains to avoid the snowstorm. They were very important property of the Beatok people, but it would be very dangerous for them to enter the mountains. It was not certain that they would be able to go back after the snowstorm. Although the white wolves in the mountains did not attack the village, it did not mean that they would let go of the prey in front of them, so the dogs were in a very dangerous situation. Yolashanda and Ao Daisai did not want to do anything. They just planned to bring all the dogs they found together and treat them like friends. They wanted to ensure their food, drink, and safety during the snowstorm. The author has something to say. Little bear, don't mention it. It's your dog. Chapter 3:21. The tall trees blocked the raging snow to a certain extent. If they had stayed in the mountains from the beginning, the animals would not have been affected too much. They just had to endure the hunger and survive the next few days. It took some distance from the fishing village to the mountains. After the thatched huts and tents collapsed, the Alaskan Malamutes, who lived in the snow all year round, used their intelligence and keenness to immediately launch a self-rescue operation. The strong dogs rescued their wives and children from the collapsed houses. There were too many dogs in the village, dozens of them, so they could not hide in the narrow igloo with their owners. The snowstorm raged outside, and it sounded so terrible that the Beatok people hiding in the house were terrified. They were afraid of the crazy weather, just like they were afraid of the wind and waves on the sea. The Beatoks, who had lived here for generations, always heard about the bad weather from their ancestors. Casualties were common, not to mention dogs. They only hoped that the dogs outside could take care of themselves. After the blizzard, they would continue to work hard for life together. The Alaskan Malamutes, who were good at pulling sleds, had a lead dog, as usual. They led their team and set off to a safe place. In the wind and snow, a small team, braving the risk of being buried by the wind and snow at any time, crossed the snow and moved forward slowly. The adult Alaskan Malamutes are fine. They already had strong enough bodies to resist the forces of nature. The sad ones were the puppies with thin bodies. When they were buried, their weak cries were inaudible in the wind and snow. Fortunately, their parents did not give up on them. The adult Alaskan Malamutes also held the puppies in their mouths and ran into the woods as fast as they could. However, many dogs had lost their sense of direction at this time. Their eyes were blurred, and the keen senses that they relied on to survive in the past were not working at all. This was very fatal. A team that had lost its direction was like a ship that could never reach the shore. There was no other way but to be buried in the sea. Woo-woo! Even though the sound of the wind and snow was very loud, a penetrating wolf howl still came from mountains. It seemed that the dogs knew that this sound was from the wolves in the mountains. As long as they followed this sound, they could go where they wanted to go. In this way, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai brought the Alaskan team to a safe place. Under the cover of the mountains and trees, the wind and snow would not blow directly here. The dogs who had escaped death were covered with snow, and some of their eyelashes were frozen. They looked really pitiful. However, their attitude was very positive. Everyone gathered together tacitly to keep warm, and the puppies were all surrounded in the middle. Alexander swore they were the smartest Alaskans he had ever seen. They were as touching as the legendary dogs in the movies, and I guess they are hungry. After saying that, she kissed Alexander. What he meant was for Alexander to stay here and not go out with him. You have to be careful. Yulashanda's head rubbed against his neck, and his eyes were full of concern. Ao Daisai seemed to smile and silently enjoyed Yulashanda's concern. He said, "You should trust me." Then he walked away, and his handsome white figure disappeared into the forest. Looking at Ao Daisai's back, Yulashanda couldn't help but feel sweet. In fact, Ao Daisai didn't need to do so much, but because he wanted to, Ao Daisai always supported him unconditionally. A large group of Alaskan Malamutes gathered here, and it was no surprise that they attracted the attention of the wolves. As victims of the bad weather, they couldn't wait to hunt to fill their stomachs. The appearance of the wolves caused a commotion in the group of Alaskan Malamutes. They all looked at the wolves warily. Yulashanda noticed that all the strong lead dogs were in front of the wolves. There was no doubt that they would fight to the death with the wolves. Anyway, before they sacrificed themselves, they couldn't let the wolves take away their puppies. When the wolves wanted to move further, they heard a warning from a tree. They looked up and saw a strong white wolf bearing its white fangs at them. The wolves retreated a little. Maybe even they didn't know why they were afraid of a lone wolf. But under the gaze of the white wolf, they couldn't continue to attack because their animal instincts made them feel that it was very dangerous. The group of hungry wolves finally retreated into the distance. Yulashanda didn't know if they left or not, as long as they didn't come to hunt. Of course, it was not Yulashanda's own merit that scared the wolves away. There were many Alaskan Malamutes gathered here, and their fighting power was not necessarily weaker than the wolves. Suddenly, the dogs that had just calmed down began to stir again. Yulashanda looked and saw that Ao Daisai came back with a deer in his mouth. The dogs were naturally afraid when they saw his figure. When Ao Daisai walked over step by step, they also retreated step by step. Perhaps they didn't feel the signs of being attacked, but they just retreated without showing their teeth. Ao Daisai threw the dead deer on the ground and left without looking at them. The eyes of the group of Alaskan Malamutes shone with hope and finally accepted the gift of the white wolf. They couldn't wait to bite off the deer's skin, and their mother bit off the meat to feed the hungry puppies. Food always gives animals a sense of satisfaction and a sense of relaxation. Slowly, they were no longer afraid of Yulashanda on the tree, and even thought that Yulashanda was with them. The sled dogs also thought of Ao Daisai, who carried food several times as a companion. After they were full, countless very curious eyes looked at Yulashanda and Ao Daisai. Their big furry heads tilted left and right for a while, and their eyes were full of kindness. Yulashanda took care of the sled dogs for an afternoon and had to admit that dogs were indeed the easiest animals to build relationships with. As long as they showed kindness to them, they would quickly recognize new friends. At night, the wind and snow were blowing wantonly again, and countless evergreen trees were blown down. Such a terrible scene made a new round of intimidation for the animals in the mountains. Yulashanda and Ao Daisai immediately came down from the tree and found a more suitable place to hug each other. The pack of sled dogs also huddled together and buried their heads. Every once in a while, the dogs guarding the outermost periphery would squeeze in to warm themselves. Yulashanda was envious of this way of keeping out the cold. It was a pity that there were only two of them, and no matter how they changed positions, they had to face the wind and snow. Why don't they join in? Of course, it was just a joke. They couldn't mix into the pack of sled dogs. They were not in the same pack. Besides, in fact, the fur on the wolf's body was very thick, and it was really not very cold. The only cold parts of the body could be its claws and nose. Yulashanda curled up his limbs and buried his nose in Ao Daisai's arms. It was very warm like this. However, as time passed, he would feel bad, so he raised his head and forced Ao Daisai to cover his nose. Ao Daisai lied to him and said, "If you warm it and then let it out, it will be even colder. It's better to stay outside." "Really?" Yolashanda didn't believe him. He felt that Ao Daisai had said that to deceive him. Okay then, but your eyelashes are frozen. I'll lick them for you. Yolashanda didn't allow any explanation. Braving the cold, he stuck out his tongue and helped Ao Daisai clean his cold face. The wind and snow had frozen Ao Daisai's eyelids. The warmth that Yolashanda brought to him seemed to be transmitted to his heart through his eyes. His heart was beating fiercely. The silent and introverted white wolf hugged his partner and quietly enjoyed her tenderness. His claws were also a little cold. If he stretched out his claws, would Yolashanda bite him hard? There was no doubt that it was a very dangerous night. The animals on the mountain were frightened. The elk gathered together in groups, not daring to sleep or move. They were starving. When the wind and snow stopped, they still had to hide from the hunters. This snowstorm not only affected the creatures on this island, but also the various ships that were sailing on the sea were in danger. Going ashore was their best choice. However, in the vast sea, not all ships had the conditions to go ashore. The shipbuilding industry in the 19th century was very developed. Large long-distance ships could basically withstand all kinds of wind and waves at sea. Some small and medium-sized wooden ships were not so lucky. Most of them would directly disintegrate on the sea. If they fell into the sea in summer, there was still a chance that they could be saved. However, in this cold weather, the sea became daunting. A medium-sized ship that was about to be unable to withstand the wind and waves finally saw the surprising coastline. Of course, they didn't just rely on luck. This island had been marked on a map, but very few people had been there. The inland land was vast enough, and the resources were more abundant than the island. Therefore, the ruler did not intend to start developing the island. The ship that came to the island to take shelter from the wind and waves found that there were also some small ships on the shore. This meant that there were people living on the island. They should be the indigenous people. The medium-sized ship was damaged and needed to stop and repair. The people on the ship thought that they could ask the indigenous people for help and then give them some daily necessities in exchange. After all, the ship itself was a merchant ship. The snowstorm that raged for 2 days finally passed. The Biotic people came out of the igloo and found that the house and tent had collapsed. The sled dogs that were hiding in the house were all gone. They were very sad because the sled dogs were very important to them. Some of them must have been killed or injured in this snowstorm. The women stayed to clean up the collapsed house. The men organized themselves and prepared to go up the mountain to find the sled dogs. So the sailors who came down from the ship saw the messy village, as well as some women and children. They looked at the crew who suddenly appeared with bewildered eyes. Fortunately, the sailors brought candy and some food. In the case of language barriers, these were the best ways to communicate and express goodwill to the greatest extent. Their ship was broken, and they needed the Biotic people's help. So they brought an old man to the bay where they parked the ship, hoping that the other party would understand when he saw this. Through the old man's gestures, the sailors learned that the young men in the village had gone to the mountains. They had to wait here for a while. The Biotic village had just been destroyed by the snowstorm. Out of pity, the owner of the merchant ship ordered the sailors to give them some things and help them put up their houses and tents again. The author has something to say. The true history can't be changed, but there will be no more tragedies here. Today is Chinese Valentine's Day, Little Bear, and Ao Daisai's Good Day. Their book will be available to everyone at 7 p.m. W Big Little Bear. Let me give you a heart. I wish everyone a sweet and happy Chinese Valentine's Day. Chapter 322. A group of Biotic were wearing thick leather boots. They walked step by step on the snow, holding crutches or pulling sleds. They knew that there was a certain danger in this trip, but they had to find the dogs no matter what. The leader was tall and strong and had rich experience in traveling. At the same time, he also predicted that the result would not be satisfactory. So the men's hearts were a little heavy. There were only brief conversations along the way, and the atmosphere was a little gloomy. A Biotic said, "How long until we reach the foot of the mountain?" "Still a long way to go." The person in front of him answered and used his crutches to point in the distance. Indeed, they were still some distance away from the foot of the mountain. At this time, the leader also said, "Everyone, stop and rest for a while." They should eat something before continuing. There was no hot water or hot food. The biotic people were used to the cold, and they accepted cold food very well. A man ate and couldn't help but call out to his dog. This mistake reminded him of the guys who were always around his feet. When the other men saw this, they also stood up and called out loudly, even if there was no effect. They were just too depressed. Their home was destroyed, and their beloved pets were missing. All these made it difficult for them to continue to remain silent. Looking at the vast expanse of white snow, some biotic people shed tears. It was obvious that Alaska was no less important to them than their family. Perhaps they were blaming themselves for not protecting their family well. After venting for a short while, the men sat down silently and continued to bury their heads in food. They didn't know that their shouts were still useful. After confirming that the snowstorm was no longer raging, Ao Daisai and Yalashanda immediately led the dogs down the mountain. Of course, the route they took could not coincide with the biotic peoples. If they walked all the way, they would basically not meet. It was daytime now, and they were walking in a large group. Suddenly, Ao Daisai, who was in charge of leading the dogs, twitched his furry ears. It seemed that he had heard something unusual. He wanted to confirm it again. At this time, Yalashanda's question confirmed his feeling. Ao Daisai, do you hear a human's voice? Yes. Fortunately, these sounds lasted for a while, and they quickly determined the direction of the other party. The snowstorm had just passed. What were the humans doing in the snow? There was only one answer: find a dog. Yalashanda immediately jumped up and looked back at the group of silly Alaska Malamutes. She was happy for the two-way relationship between their master and pet. It's probably their master. Let's go and meet them, Ao Daisai said. Sure enough, they changed their direction and ran towards the group of biotic. The infected Alaskans worked hard to keep up with them. Through these 2 days of getting along, feeding, they have regarded these two powerful white wolves as trustworthy partners. The biotics finished their food and continued on their way. The atmosphere was still very oppressive, and it took a long time for someone to speak. After walking for some time, the man in second place suddenly patted their leader and looked into the distance. He said excitedly, "Look, look." The joy in this voice infected everyone. The biotics, who were still immersed in depression a second ago, saw the mighty group of Alaskans in the distance the next second. It was true. The furry children they had been worried about were gathering in front of them. The biotics excitedly called out to their dogs and quickened their pace. However, there was still a distance between them, and they might have to walk for a full 10 minutes. Such a long distance was enough for the Alaskan Malamutes to hear the shouts of their masters, and they ran even more excitedly. Woof, woof, woof. Woof, woof, woof. The barks came one after another, and the whole quiet snow suddenly became lively. Even Yalashanda and Ao Daisai felt the joy of the dogs. When this group of Alaskan Malamutes and biotics got together, they hugged and kissed with tears of joy. The way they expressed their feelings was very straightforward and simple. Of course, there were some dogs who did not see their masters, but that did not stop them from rubbing against the masters of other dogs. After all, they all knew each other. There was nothing happier than escaping from death and seeing an acquaintance. A happy scene appeared on the snow. At this time, Yalashanda and Ao Daisai stood quietly at the side, with blessings, feeling very happy. The biotics and the dogs were affectionate for a while, and then started to count the number of dogs. At this moment, they finally saw two white wolves looking at them nearby. The distance was neither close nor far, and they did not look like they were here to hunt. From discovering the white wolves to figuring out the intentions of the white wolves, the atmosphere at the scene gradually quieted down. Yalashanda realized that the gazes of these biotics landed on him and Ao Daisai. It was not fear or rejection. If he had to say, it was reverence. At first, Yalashanda was not sure, but then a biotic slowly walked over with some frozen fish and placed it not far away from them. Although Yelishanda did not like these hard-frozen fish, he was touched by these simple beatox. Yelishanda licked the frozen fish and glanced at his boyfriend. Cough. Shall we eat it? It's his kind intentions. Actually, he did not want to eat it, but he wanted to trick Ao Daisai into eating it. Otherwise, he would not give him face. What if he was sad? Ao Daisai looked at the hard-frozen fish. This fish should have been frozen last autumn. It was so hard that it could kill a dog. He did not want to eat it either. So he gave the frozen fish to the Alaskan dogs. After dinner, the men and the sailors worked together to set up a spacious house, this time using wood and nails. The Beatox had never seen nails before. They usually fix things with ropes and wooden nails. The boss, who had caught a cold, finally lived in a warm house, which improved his typhoid and prevented it from deteriorating into tuberculosis. According to history, this merchant contracted tuberculosis in this accident and died not long after returning to the mainland. His merchant ship was inherited by another person, who could be said to be the fuse that pushed the Beatox to their destruction. But now, fortunately, the Alaskans who were forced into the mountains by the blizzard were all alive. The men who went out to look for the dogs returned to the village in time and helped the merchant repair his ship in time so that he could return to the land in time to treat his illness. Yelishanda did not know that his meddling had once again played a key role. Early the next morning, the men in the village took the dog out to pull the sleigh. They were going to pull the wood to the place where the ship was docked. They originally planned to help the sailors repair the ship first and then repair the rest of the house. One part of the ship hit a reef and broke a hole. It was pure luck that the ship was not overturned in the sea at that time. The young and strong Alaskans were all arranged, and everyone worked diligently. Yelishanda and Ao Daisai were the most leisurely on the whole beach. The two of them were like supervisors, looking here and there. They could not help it. The 19th century ship was too retro. When they saw it, they could not help but point out in their hearts. As the weather cleared up, the merchant who had caught a cold also came out. Perhaps he was worried about the sailors. Yelishanda kept hearing from the sailors that he was called James. He guessed that he should be an old man over 50 years old. In the end, he was wrong. The other party was a tall and handsome young man. His face was a little pale because of his illness, but his eyes were bright and full of spirit. He had a very good temperament, like a noble young man who had walked out of an oil painting. His eyes were blue. Do you look good? Ao Daisai's voice sounded in Yelishanda's heart with a little teasing. Yelishanda came back to his senses and shuddered. He quickly shook his head like a rattle drum. You look better. The author has something to say. Joe, flattery is always effective. If this noble young man survives, the Beatox will have a backer. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.